Welcome to Table Talk, the place for deep conversations in the Geekverse. And trust me, when we tear into a subject, we go deep. I'm Heath, and I'll be your host. Each episode, I'll be talking with one or more creators, authors, illustrators, publishers, or other movers and shakers in games, TV, books, movies, or other areas of the Geekverse. Regular guests include Douglas A. Burton, the author of Faraway Bird, a multi-award-winning historical fiction novel of the Byzantine Empress Theodora. He's also the author of The Heroine's Labyrinth, an alternative story structure to the hero's journey that often occurs in stories with feminine heroes. That structural framework frequently comes up in our analysis of story. Brianna da Silva, she's the director and co-writer of The Cultists, a Lovecraftian comedy mockumentary-style web show here on YouTube, and the author of The City of Reckoning, an epic war and young love. Cameron Pasha is a screenwriter, director, novelist, and was a writer and producer on the series Kings, a producer on NBC's Bionic Woman, and a co-producer and writer for Sleeper Cell. He's also written for the CW series Nikita and Roswell, New Mexico. He's been breaking news from inside Lucasfilm, Disney, and Hollywood. His analysis and commentary have become very popular on YouTube. We regularly meet to discuss and analyze stories, and when we do, we dive into graduate-level seminars on story structure and writing. Come on in and let's go deep. And when I say we're going deep, I mean you'd better bring your hard suit. Other guests have included Lou Anders, the author of the Thrones and Bones fantasy novels Once Upon a Unicorn, the creator and publisher of the Norengard RPG, and the author of Star Wars, A Pirate's Price, the book that explains why the Millennium Falcon is on the planet Batu at Star Wars Galaxy's Edge. Mark Tassin, the creator of the World of Ataltis, head of Mechanical Muse, former director of the Gen Con Writers Symposium, and the head developer of the new Cool Name RPG. Let's see, who else?
Bond. James Bond.
Well, not James Bond. Not yet. Maybe soon, though. But I have interviewed Jamie Stegmaier, the founder of Stonemaier Games, crowdfunder extraordinaire, and publisher of many hit board games like Scythe and Wingspan. Brian Colin, sculptor of the world of Revelo Monster Busts, and the creator of the vast grim dark horror RPG. Ajit George, the Dungeons & Dragons author. We talked about game writing, education, and his contribution to Van Richter's Guide to Ravenloft and the development of the Journeys to the Radiant Citadel.
I am Hela, Odin's firstborn, the commander of the legions of Asgard, the rightful heir to the throne and the goddess of death.
Well, actually, that interview got rather spicy, so I think I'd better just keep that one to myself. Kate Wilson, a YouTuber, actress, host, and prolific geek guru who's now working to make a new show dedicated to the world of tabletop gaming a reality. So buckle up and get ready for a wild ride, because it's time to explore the worlds of tabletop gaming, sci-fi, fantasy, and all of geekdom through the eyes of those who are making things happen.
Atomic batteries to power. Turbines to speed.
Roger, ready to move out.
It's time for Table Talk. Hello, everyone. Good evening. It is so good to see you. Welcome to my home, welcome to the office, and welcome to Table Talk. Once again, we are doing one of the things that we really do best, I think, here on Table Talk, which is not only have a detailed and deep discussion, but talk about some of the things that we are actually doing, the people who are on the show are actually doing in the creative space. And so that means that tonight, like, eventually you just have to do it. We've been talking about it. So tonight we are going to be talking about Brianna da Silva's book, City of Reckoning. And this is a monster book right here. I mean, how about this for a debut novel here? And we already know that we're going to have to be going in for a part 2 here, because Doug and I have been reading it. We got Brianna here, the author, to talk about the book. We got Doug with us to talk about this. The book also will be talking about, I'm sure, Heroine's Labyrinth aspects of this. I'm here. I'm only here in this book. Doug's a bit further. Of course, Brianna knows it all. So we're going to go and do everything we can tonight. I'm sure we'll be coming back for a part 2. So here we go. Welcome, Doug and Brianna.
Yeah. What's up, everybody?
Hey. It is so good to see everybody. We got James Bacon with Bacon Gaming here. That's his new channel right there, because he started his own channel. He's got YouTube videos being posted, James Bacon, over on that channel. So go and check it out.
I got to go watch some of the new ones.
Yes, he has got videos being posted. We got Sable Phoenix here. Right. That doesn't matter. If you're here, we're here to talk about this with Brianna. You may choose to pick it up. Right. It is a huge book.
I should say there may be spoilers in this discussion, like up through about chapter 74. So there's 5 parts of the book. We won't talk about the ending. So if you, I don't think anything we discussed today will reduce your ability to enjoy it if you haven't read it. So
yes, okay, that's an excellent point. Anything, there may be spoilers, but not for the end. So if you're here, we'll go get the book, and then we're going to talk about it again, probably a couple of weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, something like that. And then we'll go to the end of the book because I have a feeling that when people talk, there's going to be a lot to say.
Yeah, hopefully we shine some light on it, and if you haven't started reading it, hopefully our discussion will entice you to grab a copy if you haven't already, or if you haven't started reading it, to go ahead and jump in and start reading it.
Because I think it's going to be definitely worth 2 parts of discussion. I mean, we've talked a lot about the Heroine's Labyrinth here, and I mean, like as Bacon Gaming says, it's a hell of a first novel right here. So probably worth 2 table talks anyway.
Valiant attempt was made to be ready to discuss the whole thing.
I tried.
Okay. I tried. Probably for the best.
Yes.
Well, I took it as a challenge. I was like, man.
Yes.
And at first I was going nice and easy. Then I started looking at the calendar. I was like, oh, geez, it's June. So I was like, then I started picking up the pace. And then I was like, Brianna, I'm on like chapter, 29. She's like, you better get going. And I started looking at I'm in trouble. But I made it to chapter 74. So I went for it. And we made the decision early today to do a 2-parter instead of to try to cram to get it all in. And I think that's the right decision. It's a big book, which means there's a lot of story. There's a lot of characters. And I think a 2-part discussion is just better suited for City of Reckoning. So
there you go. Oh, I feel like we should mention, Heath, the fact that if anyone doesn't have a copy, the ebook is currently still on sale. So it is currently $1.99
per page.
Definitely mention that
per page. So if anyone is interested in that, they haven't grabbed their copy. That is. Oh, and I was supposed to have another link ready to send to, and I don't have it. Give me a second. I want to send another link for people too. Dang it.
Kindle right here. Let me put this link in the.
That is the best price in 30 days.
Well, are you sending a link? You want me to send
that's
out?
Corina, huh?
That right there? No, that would be Lucia.
Oh, really? With the bow?
Yes.
Okay.
She has a bow too, but yes.
Oh, wow. Okay. Huh.
I have another link too. Just that if anyone is interested. So I'm participating. The reason why City of Reckoning is currently on sales because I'm participating in a book fair. I just send the link to you, Heath, if you want to send it to everybody else, or show them. But yeah, so if you're like, I want a bunch of ebooks that are like fantasy, sci-fi. There's a whole bunch. There's like 100+ that are all on sale, all in one page together.
This right here.
Yeah. So I just want to share that. That's part of my duty as an author participating in the sale. I'm supposed to
right on
with people. So, but yeah, there's a whole bunch there, and some of those sales are not going to be the whole month. But so
do you have any of these that you would recommend? Because it'd be cool. Maybe we should all buy one or something.
Oh, I wish I could say that because I actually don't. I don't know. I don't have like a personal connection to them or anything. But yep.
City of Reckoning.
Yeah, there it is. Yeah, it's a whole bunch of different categories. So whatever you're in the mood for, you may find it there. Yep.
Yeah, I got the title to book 2 for City of Reckoning. Blood of Rebels.
No, wait, are you making a joke that's what you don't know what the title is, do you?
No.
The title is The Blood Temple. So it does have the word blood in it. That's
really? Yeah, that stuck out in my head. I was like, man, The Blood of Rebels. It just sounds awesome. So I just wrote it down on the site.
Well, yeah.
No, that's cool. No, people throw out titles to me and stuff too. I'm like, man, my mind's already made up.
No, it's the second one isn't about rebels. So
okay, I gotcha.
Okay.
And then how do you pronounce? There was a couple words I was curious of your pronunciation.
Sure.
Do you say neurasia or neurasia or neurasia or do you say something else?
It's Neurasia.
Neurasia. Okay, that's what I said.
Yep.
Oh, and the other
Like
one I had
like
a big
Asia,
question.
like the continent Asia. Just put
That's what I didn't. Okay, that's how I was pronouncing it.
Yep.
The other one was Pelisius or Pelisius. How did you pronounce that creature's name?
Pelisius.
Pelisius. Okay. All right. So I'm 2 for 2.
Yeah.
And then also Brianna.
Yeah, there is a pronunciation guide at the end.
What?
Yeah, you should at the very end of the book. I don't know if that should be at the front, but yeah.
A pronunciation guide.
Yeah.
Brianna, you're out of control.
Well, I have all these books, all these made up names and words. So
Oh my God, this is
That'll
like
help the
5
people.
pages. Look at this, everybody. I don't know if you could see it or not.
Here, I'll solo you, Doug.
Yeah.
I just
We've
put
got
everything,
multiple pages of this.
anything that showed up that was a non-English word or name, I put it in there. Yeah, that was very thorough.
Oh, this is
All
great.
day. Yep.
So don't make the mistake I did and try to corner the author and ask her. Go to the back of the book.
It also will tell you a little bit about the accent of the 2 different main cultures that you're encountering there and like how they tend to pronounce things. So
That's actually cool. I always like when books give me a little a feeling that the world exists beyond the pages. You know, I actually appreciate that.
it was also for my own reference, so I wouldn't forget things. So
Why? Why? That's a good
Yes.
Yeah.
So how do we want to do this conversation here?
Well, I mean, I think we start with you, Brianna, and what you want to say about your inspiration for this book and how it came to be and what it means and that kind of thing.
Oh, okay.
So we-
Here, first
I'll
off, I have a
prepare for that
question. When did
How
you
come to
start writing this?
I started writing this when I was, I think, 20. So I wrote this it was like a good chunk of my 20s was me writing this and completely rewriting this book.
Jeez.
And yeah, and the rewrite was also happening during a very turbulent time in my life when I was completely questioning everything I believed, realizing I was queer, a whole bunch of stuff like that. And so there was also some traumatic experiences I had at that time, and that all very much kind of informed the themes that I wanted to write about, specifically about, trauma and the correct and improper ways to respond to suffering. And yeah, also just the underdog and the, fighting against marginalization and stuff like that was definitely at first kind of a subconscious theme for me, but then it became a lot more personal as I was working on it. So I think that would be the best way I could answer that question.
Okay, so how many years did it take you total?
7
7 years, and then
Yeah.
once you finished it, how long did it take you to go from a final manuscript to, or I should say, the final draft to the final manuscript?
Well, that was 7. That was the entire period. So I think it was about 2. It was like both of the times when I was writing it versus rewriting it. That was about 2 or 3 years to like actually do the draft itself, and there was a lot of minor drafts in between those. So there was
How many people did beta reading on it?
Oh, that's a good question, because there was a bunch of people. Heath was one of the people that read the early version. That was more. I want to say that was like half a dozen people, maybe somewhere between 4 and 6 or something like that. And then the second version, I had a larger group of people, and it just dwindled down. It ended up being one person named Nikita who finished the whole thing, and she's like the biggest fan of the book in the world. It's very funny, but
That's great.
yeah. So yeah, there was another guy that almost came to the end, but he had stuff going on. But yeah, because I was giving it at that time, I was literally like giving out. As I would write a chapter, I would send it out to people. So that kind of a schedule doesn't necessarily work for everyone.
It's funny too. I had such mixed feelings while reading it because I would never want to tell a writer to change what they feel they wanted to put out there.
Yeah.
But I couldn't help but thinking, God, this is so big. It's so daunting. It would scare away so many people from reading it. I is what I was thinking. I was like, man, I bet a lot of people would pass just because it's so big. So I was like, man, I should tell, and not that it would matter because it's already published, but it's like, part of me was like, I wish Brianna would have made this in smaller bite sizes. But then I was like, I don't know. Having gone through the first 74 chapters, I think I understand and got the feel for there's a certain effect that only a big book can give you. You know, when a character does go through a major change in chapter 50 that they were clearly not doing in chapter 1 or 2, like you feel like that's been earned. You know, when they're out in the wilderness and you've been going with them in well-written chapters and you're in 50 and 60, it's really simulating a serious quest. So it's not a bite-sized thing. So then I was like, I don't know. I think this is the book that Brianna intended to put out. You know, I think it would be wrong to suggest she should have chopped it up to make it more appealing. You know, so it's like a double-edged sword. It's like if she did the commercial thing, she may have gotten more readers. But if she did the commercial thing, maybe we wouldn't have got the City of Reckoning the way I'm experiencing it. And I bet most people have experienced it who have read it, which is a great undertaking in very well-written chapters that none of the chapters feel like throwaways or filler or unnecessary or, God, this obviously should have been trimmed. Like, it is a step-by-step, chapter-by-chapter adventure. So I think you did the right thing by keeping it big. It's just tough to get readers to get over that hump, I think.
Especially because I'm a debut author. I'm so glad you brought up that particular topic, because that's a really good one. Because basically, yes, you are correct that hurts me very much to do that. And it was something that I thought about a lot while I was working on it. I was like, can I turn this into multiple smaller books? And from a storytelling and artistic perspective, the answer was very solidly no for me. Like, it was like this is meant to be this big epic. You know, it's a cohesive story, and it's a long form story, right? You know, it's following the same kind of logic that like a TV show would have, as opposed to a singular movie. You know, this is a long form story, but you're not supposed to do that as a debut author. Like, that's what everybody tells you. Like, a good example that would be like Samantha Shannon. She did this. Talk about massive books. Hers is bigger than mine. It's huge. It's, The Priory of the Orange Tree. It's a massive book. But she was only able to do that commercially after she was already best-selling author, writing
after she was successful. Yeah.
Right. So that's what they all tell you to do, that if you have that kind of a big story in you, that you're supposed to wait. But at the time I was working on it, that was what I was inspired to write. There wasn't anything else at the time that I was that, just driven to write. So I had to follow. I had to listen to the muse. I had to listen to the artist, even though I knew that was not going to lead to the best commercial, outcomes. In the meanwhile, that was me. Like, I felt like I had to be true to that. So that's why. But it was a hard choice, because I'm like, yes, especially because like especially the setups, because with these types of epic stories, I tried so hard to make it. As interesting as I could from the very beginning. Because like I'll bring Samantha Shannon's book, Priory of the Orange Tree, to mind. Like, it takes, like, that thing's huge, and it takes about half of it before it really starts to get interesting. There's always a lot of setup and then payoff with these.
Well, you took the risk of starting where you wanted, which is, I think, the right call, by the way, now that I'm deeper into the book. But it's a huge risk to start with minor conflicts, local conflicts in what will be an epic tale, right?
Right.
Like the Sackville Bagginses, that's such a minor conflict for, Lord of the Rings, and yet we have to deal with it early on.
I just want to say, just to finish my point real quick, that's another thing that definitely is a hurdle, because I'm not an established author, right? So I don't have people's trust. There's no reason for them to believe that the time that they're spending is going to be paid off. So I'm just kind of banking on, well, hopefully later, as I have more books coming out, eventually people will read my other books and they'll come back to this.
Well, I will say this, knowing you as well as I do, at least insofar as we've known each other through Table Talk and Heath's Geekverse, I had faith in you as a creative 100%. But of course, you don't know how someone's novel writing is going to play out. And it's a risk, man, when they're asked, because if you don't like it, it's going to be hard to hide that. And not only was it like, okay, I'm going to be reading her writing, it's like, boom, you're going to read a lot of it. Like, if I don't like it, totally. If it's not engaging, if it's bad writing, if let's say Brianna wasn't a good writer, I mean, dude, I would have to come up with an excuse, because there's no way I'd be able to get. I'm proud to say, not only is Brianna a good writer, I think she's a great writer.
Oh, thank you.
And I'm not saying that just to earn points or just because we're all friendly here on the channel. I found myself really enjoying her writing. I really enjoyed these chapters. And if it was anything less than excellent, I just don't think I would be sustained to get through 1,000 pages. So you're right. Like, I was even scared knowing you, like, tackling this. So
right? That's the hurdle, right?
It is the hurdle, because you're just like, man, it's either going to grab me or it's not. And it grabbed me. So it's a great book. And I'm not even done with it yet. And I can say that I know I'm in good hands. So I know when I get to the end, I'm going to feel very complete.
Brianna, will you let everybody know who is watching here who has not read this? What is this story? What is it about? I mean, it's a fantasy novel, but like, what is the story? What's it about? What do people need to know about this?
Yeah, so the very short version to describe it is, this is a story about two young women. So we've got a girl with bat wings hiding a terrible secret, and an elite female warrior haunted by her traumatic past. And both of these girls are going to stand up against an empire in order to take revenge against the powerful people that have abused them. So it's a story about, it's a story about revolution. It's a story about trauma and how we respond to it, and young love, things like that.
Tell people more about this world. What's going on? What's going on? Like, in the first 20 chapters or whatever, like, which is not a spoiler because this book is 4,000 chapters long. So
109.
Like, what are you reading? Like, what are you getting into in the first of this? Like, tell everybody.
You want me to sell more? I need to practice. I should have been more practiced for this. So this is definitely, it's an epic. It's an epic in terms of, like, I'll just talk about, like, sort of tone and what type of fantasy it is first. So it's a war epic, but it's also epic adventure. So we have characters that are going out into the wilderness, and there's survival elements as well. And if you like experiences in fantasy where you're, encountering new cultures and monsters and things like that, it's got lots of that, lots of action. But the story is about, sorry, I'm just realizing I'm, like, not that sharp today, which is not the best situation.
Well, you always get, like, real simple questions, and those are the ones that trip you up.
Right. It's also been a while since I wrote the book, so it's not that fresh in my mind. But so our main character, Kindy, that's the one with the bat wings. She has we'll say the masked minotaur character in her life, which is this politician named Charris, and she has decided that she's going to get out of his control by signing up to join the military that is recruiting people very rapidly because their empire is being invaded by a much more powerful empire. And what they discover is that this more powerful empire also has magic. So they're they're in trouble and they need help. And so they're going to send people out into the wilderness to go get help from some other kingdoms to give them some allies. But we have our other character, Lucia, who is she's part of one of the conquered people in this empire, and she's trying to use this war and this mission for her own ulterior motives in order to free her people from the empire. So that would be, I guess, the plot elements.
And then there's heroic partners that we start following them pretty, like Jensen and Karina. Like, we start following these other, and Castan. Caston. How do you pronounce his name?
Caston. But yes, Caston, I would say. He would say but maybe in their accent it would be a bit different, but yes.
Right. And these start as very heroic partners, like secondary. But as the story develops, you really start following them just as closely, and you get just as wrapped up in these other characters as you did with the lead character. In my opinion, like where I'm at, they're all different competing storylines. So they're all excellent,
linked thematically, and I think that'll be clear, especially as you get towards the end, why they're all there.
Well, they're crossing over. There's some crossover between them, which is done very elegantly. I appreciate some stories that can do that well, where you're following one point of view and then the chapter ends and then you pick up another point of view in that scene. So the scene continues from the other point of view in the room. And Brianna did that a couple times and to great effect.
Okay. Well, wait, let's go back. Brianna, let's start at the beginning. You open with a prologue.
Oh, yes. That's another
conversation you're not supposed to do.
Tell me about this prologue.
Yes.
And so when someone opens this, they're going to be reading this for the first time. What is going on in this prologue? Who is this character? What is happening, and why did you write it? And why is it important? Like, let's start there.
Yeah, that's a good one. I had that on my list of things to bring up because that's another thing you're not supposed to do ever, and which I do think 99% of the time you should not have prologues, because most of the time when you put a prologue, it's like you're just avoiding starting the action, right? Because a story needs to start as late as possible. I think that's a very important principle. And usually prologue is like someone just wants to throw some extra information, at the beginning.
Well, they just have this cool scene in their head. And,
Yeah. And so, and this is one of those ones that I was fighting because I was like, no, I don't want to put a prologue. And in my earlier versions, there wasn't one. And I kept coming back to feeling like this backstory with the character Lucia was really important for two reasons. So one of the things that is really important in a big epic story like this, in my opinion, is being able to show change, which is like not as popular lately, I feel like, in a lot of movies and books, and like I don't know why. I feel like that's kind of a conversation in of itself that sorry, I'm going to go off on a couple little tangents and then I'll come back to your question.
Hey, well, this is table talk.
But I was thinking, for example, like one of the things that really annoyed me about what was the show with Obi-Wan is that we're going back and we met young Leia, and she was literally just like herself but younger. And I was
Totally.
Like, personalities, sure, but I wanted to see how she became this, powerful person that we respect. Like it's
totally.
It's like sometimes when people write these stories where everyone just kind of pop out into existence already with their strength and already with their, whatever power they have as a character. I'm like, have you not experienced any growth in your life? Like, how are you? I don't know. It's bizarre. And I think it's really important to show that in our stories as well. It's so interesting, right? Like that's, I knew what Kindy and Lucia were going to be, but I wanted to see how they would become that. And that's so much more interesting, is have a character who starts at a place of weakness. He starts at a place being disempowered, starts as a coward, and then becomes courageous, right? Then becomes strong, all those kinds of things. So with Lucia, we're starting at her lowest, right? The very opening sentence is about her running. She's a child. She's running from abusers. And she's going to become a very powerful character, right? And so that her arc is important to be able to show where she begins. But it's also the prologue is its own story. It has a complete arc, and it's important thematically for reasons I will be a little bit vague about right now until we finish the story. But it is basically a smaller version of what you're about to read.
Well,
so it is kind of mirroring.
Tell us what Leia is. Tell us what she is, what she's doing, why she is so amazing.
She's the
I think I would say. Can I talk about it?
Please, I feel like you have things you want to say. Just go ahead.
Well, we're opening. She's working. The story opens in this fantasy tribal environment. Okay, where we've got this young woman who is dealing with being beaten up by other people.
She's really
she
a girl,
hiding
right?
a secret about herself, that she has been touched, and that she is one of the, what do you call it, the aberrants, right? Okay, and particularly that she is an aquatic, and she's dealing with this also, that others her from her society, that she's got these aquatic traits about her. She is dealing with that. Her father is the chieftain of the tribe, and this tribe is being oppressed by the Dorish Empire, right? And so the father is involved in a rebellion against this. And she, even though she is small, she starts off with being chased and trying to get away from people. She's inducted into an elite order of warriors, where she's given this wolf that is going to bond with her and that she's going to grow up with. And then later her father is taken by the Empire for his conspiracy against them. And then she finds out that she is declared the chieftain of the tribe to go forward. So she's got to,
and she's too young, really.
Right. Young, but she's established herself as this, she's going to have to establish herself as this warrior with the wolf, and she's going to have to find her identity as the chieftain, even though her father's been taken. I mean, that's what you find out in the opening pages, right?
Yes, thank you. That was a very, very good summary.
Yeah.
That was a great summary.
Okay.
And you reminded me another
That's
thing.
What's going on in the story from the opening pages. That's where you go.
That was the epicness. And so there was, you just reminded me of two other reasons why I included that prologue. One, it's a really interesting way to start the story. Like, I feel like meeting that character at this point is very compelling. It was something that I knew I would enjoy reading about. But it's also a much better way to introduce the world, because otherwise we would have been starting with Kindy, who is part of the oppressor.
We'll talk about that in just a second.
Right. She's and not only that, she's pretty high up in power in a lot of ways. So starting with, we're way down and the level of oppression, and we're looking at the empire from that lens. It's a much more it's just a much better way to step into that environment. So,
well, you also do something that I pick up on in my analysis for the Heroines Labyrinth when I was studying heroines in general for the Sacred Fire. And this is super important. And this is what like Rey Skywalker / Palpatine never had. Our heroines come from something. And so good stories establish what I call the larger communal fire of the native culture. And so there's something being passed down to the heroine from their culture and family that they're expected, that there's an expectation of continuity. And so your prologue clearly establishes that. And also, so being an aberrant is almost like a secret symbol for the Sacred Fire in both her and in Kindy, by the way.
That's cool.
Clearly. Because it's something that is passed down to them from the culture to which they either don't know they want to be a part of or do know they want to be a part of. But heroines always have to reconcile this, what the expectations are that are passed down to them, and then what they want to do with it. It's always, there's a little bit of a clash. And believe it or not, the wolf is a symbol. It's a beautiful symbol of what is passed from the older generation to the younger. Think of it like the green crystal of Krypton, a symbol of the native culture that is handed down like passing a torch. And then it's up to what the heroine does with it. So this prologue, although maybe ill-advised from the story gurus of the world, is very effective because it establishes a classic dynamic with heroines between what is being given to them, that what came before them, and then what they have now, which when we go past the prologue, we're going to find out what she wants to do with all of this and how difficult this path is going to be for her, whether she has big dreams yet or not, So I picked up on that right away, and I was like, man, Brianna at least is giving me the sense that this heroine is coming from something that matters, that may be misunderstood, and that it is clearly in her hands. Like there is a clear sense of passing that torch.
That's a really cool analysis. Oh dang, I was about to say something else and I just forgot what it was.
The aberrance.
I was just gonna say, like, I would put this prologue as the exception to the rule, which is, again, it's like that's so working against me as a first time author, but that was my conclusion I came to. I tried to write it without the prologue, and I just felt like it was better with it. I still think it's unlikely that probably any other book I ever write will have a prologue, but if it does, it'll be another exception. And it's something that I think if you're going to put a prologue, you should really, really try not to. And if you can get away with not doing it, then do it. And if you're like, no, the story is better with it, then there you go. That's
it's good advice. It's not a rule.
Exactly. It's a good, it's like a maybe rule of thumb, but not a hard and fast law.
Yeah, I don't even like saying rule of thumb because it has that word rule in it. I hate that word. But this advice it's not for nothing. Experienced writers have run into problems with this. So when they tell you don't do that, you should take that seriously. But if it's not working for you, then break that rule by all means. And I'm glad you did. I think it works very well with City of Reckoning.
Okay. And then what happens?
Well, you're like making me like tell my own story. I feel like I want you to do it.
No, I'm about to do it for you. I'm about to do it for you. Because
Okay,
then we
please
move
do.
into chapter 1, which
It's a big
contrasts
deal more fresh on your mind than mine. So,
but then we move to chapter 1, which is a contrast with the prologue in many ways. With the prologue, you were talking about, of course, both of them deal with young women as their characters. So that's not the contrast. But the young woman in the prologue is in a tribal environment, is being asked to assume a leadership role and so forth, and also an elite warrior role. Whereas, all right, then now we open in chapter 1 with a different character, Kindy, who is a daughter of a noble. So we're in an urban environment. We're not out in the tribal environment in the wilderness. We come to an urban environment. The two things that tie these things together, the prologue and the chapter 1, is that we're both talking about young women characters and the issues they are dealing with.
Well, they're also aberrants.
And they are both aberrants. That's the other one. Now, Lasia?
Lycia.
I know I got that. Lycia is a aquatic, whereas Kindy is a nocturne, which means she's got the bat wings, she's got the claws, but they're both hiding that. They're both different kinds of aberrants, but they're both hiding that. So there's a similarity.
They both can hide their aberrant effects. Kindy,
at least for
a while. Right, for now. Right.
And that Kindy is in rebellion against her culture, right? Because she is part of the noble culture. You get the sense of what her father, but especially her mother, expects her to do as part of society. She's already an outsider because she's one of these aberrants, which we find out that people hunt. So she's having to conceal that, especially with this wealthy noble family, and that she is an addict.
Dathel.
Right, that she is a Dathel addict. And so we like in chapter 1, we encounter her trying to use her allowance to secure the drug that she's addicted to. And why is she addicted to this drug?
Oh, I think you might find that out in part 5. You do. You find that out later in the book. So,
well, I get the sense that it is like like an opioid, something to take off stress and reduce mental anguish and pain.
It's like a physical pain is one of the reasons why people will use it, but it also has that kind of like, an
Oxycontin or something.
Exactly.
Maybe.
Very reduces stress is a large result. Yeah,
because she's got all that because she is this outsider that she has to hide this to save not only herself but her family, which could be in danger if she is exposed. And what happens during this?
You're doing a great job telling the story. I think I'm just going to give it back to you.
Well, we encounter the masked Minotaur character, right?
Yeah. Oh, he's even wearing a mask at the beginning.
And he is even masked in the
pretty funny. He doesn't keep that on, but
wow.
When you first meet him, he is wearing an actual mask.
Right. So tell us about
that. Boy, that's interesting.
You want me?
What was your question?
To explain?
Sure. Yeah.
How about you go? I'm sorry.
No. To be honest, I'm curious to hear what you have to. I am the weakest on the opening chapters and the strongest on the chapters I've been reading over the last couple of weeks.
That's fine.
So there's a part of me that wants to review the opening chapters again anyway, in more detail. So I am curious to kind of revisit them through someone who's very clear about them.
Yeah. So what happens in the opening chapter is a group of men try to attack and rape her. And she, in order to defend herself and escape, she ends up revealing her wings and her claws. So now there's someone out there that knows that she exists, that there's someone that has that. She also has left her cloak behind, which had the noble seal on it. So someone out there is able to figure out that there's a noble girl that is a aberrant. But she also, in escaping, she injured one of the men. Yes. So I guess we'll leave it at that. So there's a way that each of them might be able to find out who the other is. So that's our chapter 1.
That's right.
That's right.
Yeah, there's she scratches the guy right across the face, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
With her bat claw. No, those were my claws.
No, she did that with the claws on her hands, actually.
Oh, that's right. They can retract, right?
They retract, right? And she can shoot them through the glove that she's got.
Right.
That's right. Okay.
Okay, so actually, Sable says, okay, so the book preview is the first chapter, not the prologue. I don't know. The free preview.
Probably. I think that might be right. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So we talk a lot about. There's a lot of this book in the opening chapters that is about the relationship between nobles and commoners.
Yes. Yes.
And their relationship. Why is that important?
Why is that important?
Yeah, sweet 0765 says loving this book.
Awesome.
Welcome. Thank you so much for being here, sweet 0765.
You're not alone, sweet 0765.
Yes. Thank you so much for being here. Here's to you, actually. We have a new person in the chat, sweet 0665. Here we go.
Awesome. Cheers.
Thank you. All right. So what is the relationship between the nobles and the commoners? And what are you trying to say about that, Brianna?
These are all these questions I'm like not prepared to answer because I haven't thought about this book in a while. In terms of, so I mean, this story is dealing, of course, a lot with I would say
classism,
but specifically about, you know, like for the people that are more upper class in the story, they're having to question their roles and whether or not they want to accept them, whether or not they want to, you know, I guess follow along with the native culture, you might say, and so that's one of the ways that they're already wrestling with that. So we have Kindy and her brother Jensen. They're already a bit rebellious against that. They're a little bit skeptical already of some of the, you know, power dynamics because they're friends. They're very close friends with some peasants that live just outside the city, and so that is one of the ways in for later rebellious sentiments.
Well, in a lot of stories, especially if you're in a medieval fantasy setting, the differences in class is always a good point of focus. If you want to show the imperfections of the native culture, you can always, in really any culture, you could kind of work on that, and the distinctive way in which the rich and the poor interact with each other.
And also from a world building perspective, I wanted to show what it was like at all these different stratum. That's why we have Caston, who is actually a slave. So he's very low, and that was something that changed too. That was not the case in my early version of that. And someone actually gave me that suggestion. They were like, "Hey, we're hearing about slaves, but I want to know what their perspective is like." And I was like, "Oh, that's perfect. I know exactly what to do." And that changed his character dramatically. That was a very major rewrite because that's of course a huge part of his story.
Right.
So that was from a world building perspective why I have that, because I wanted to see, because you're seeing different aspects of what this empire is like depending on who you are, how you're experiencing it differently, and you know they're all going to converge, all those storylines converge, but being able to have people that are in that society from different angles, it just brings some more interesting.
Okay.
Like,
then let's talk about
diverse backgrounds and perspectives.
Exactly.
Let's talk about your different characters and their relationship to this empire and why that's important, Brianna.
Why is this? Okay.
Because we've got.
I was not expecting this kind of conversation.
She's having a strong response to your question.
What kind of conversation were you expecting to have on tabletop?
I don't know. I guess I wasn't expecting.
We've got the Empire of Dorina is central to this. Okay. And your characters experience this empire in different ways. From the opening, I mean, when you open with the different characters, they have a different relationship with this empire. What are they?
Right. So we have Kindy and Jensen, as we mentioned already. They are. Oh yeah. So I guess I should mention they're the different ethnic groups, of course. So the Dorans, they are the ones that are that have conquered this region, and the original inhabitants are the Sibani and the Masori. And so Lacia is from the Masori. Caston is biracial, so he is. So that's another perspective too, right? So he's kind of having a foot in both doors, so to speak. So he's half Doran, half Sibani, and then our other characters are Dorish, but they're a different stratum. So we have our two that are noble, and then two that are peasants. Did that answer the question?
Okay. Okay. So
yeah.
Wait. It's not Lasia. I always say that. It's
Lucia. That's why there's a little
Lucia.
accent.
Okay.
Yeah, 3 syllables.
Lucia. Okay, Lucia is a ruler in her culture,
Yes,
but one that is dominated by Dorina.
exactly. Yes.
Okay, now we have Kindy.
Well, hold on,
who
and real
is
quick.
a noble
And
in
she's-
her culture. Okay, Doug.
Well, I was just going to say, and she's also kind of too young to be the leader.
Yeah, she's an
Okay,
underdog.
Right. Yes, there's that. But
Very Old Testament
she's the
biblical
upper
feel.
class.
I was the youngest, and yet I became yes.
She's
Right.
the upper class of a
Mm.
subjugated people by the Dorina.
Yes. Yes.
Kindy is the upper class of the subjugating people.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Then we have like Corin.
Well, hold
What?
on,
Go
but
Okay.
she's an aberrant,
Mhm.
so she's kind of an
But-
outsider inside this
Right.
noble
But
house.
both of them are outsiders because they exhibit this additional quality. Right. Yes.
I guess
that's
Jensen
very
would be the one that isn't. I mean,
Jensen is the one who
related
isn't.
her, but yeah. But
Okay.
for the most part, he's not. He's not an outsider.
Okay. But then we've got Karina and Lucas, right?
Mm-hmm.
Who are the lower class of the dominant people. Right? Okay. So we've got
Yep.
so they you get to see the empire through, yes, you are the right group of people, but you happen to be the lower class of that group of people.
Yes.
So
more
you've got the
expendable, less
conflicts.
power.
So you're setting up the relationships between these two groups of people so that you've got some groups that are together and some that are opposed to one another in different ways. You've got the groups who are the part of the in group for the part of the people, but then you also have the people who are part of the in group because they're the upper class. You were talking about this because both. Oh my God, what's her name?
Who?
Lucia. So both
Lucia.
Lucia and
Yes.
so Lucia, I'm going to say it wrong every time. So both Lucia
Okay.
and Karina understand each other because they are the subjugated people. They have the elements of subjugation.
Lucia and Caston. You're thinking of Caston, the slave boy, right? Because he's
Oh,
partially.
no, I was thinking about the peasant. But okay,
Oh,
it could
you're
be
saying that
Caston
they're
as
the
well.
peasant. Oh, I got you. Yeah, you're comparing all. Okay, I'm on the same
Yeah.
page now.
So there's an element of Lucia and the peasant. Then you've got Caston as well, because Caston and Lucia don't go together because one's slave and one's chieftain.
Right.
Okay, but there's also the element of subjugation because Lucia and Kindy go together because they're both
Yep.
upper class.
Those
And they're
two mirror
both-
each other in a lot of subtle ways too.
Okay.
Yes.
So you set up with this group of characters because you're following different groups of characters, and the different chapters follow different characters.
Yes.
And so you are playing with the different relationship that all of these characters have with this empire.
And the different prejudices that they have and the different reasons, because there's a lot of reasons why they shouldn't be able to work together, right? And they don't always. There are some serious rifts that happen. Yeah.
Okay.
Well, and also Caston is kind of like less manly as a warrior class, right? He's more prone, like he becomes the healer for medicine and everything. So
Yeah.
he's not like
he's a
your
reluctant warrior. He doesn't want to be one.
right.
Yeah.
So he's not your classic warrior type. He's looked down upon and bullied really by the warrior class, even though he's a part of the warrior class, you could say.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah. These are really, really good questions. I don't want you to me being taken off guard is because they're good questions. I just want to get that out of the way. I'm like, oh, okay. Yes. I can tell you've been thinking about it. I appreciate.
I have been. I was trying. Yeah, even though I'm not as far into it as I was trying to try. Even though I'm not as far into it as Doug is, which is to my shame. I was trying to think about what is going on in what kind of relationships between the characters you're trying to set up, and what kind of story are you trying to tell?
And that's why this is another reason why it's so big, right? Because having all these different relationships it supports what's happening thematically, and it makes it all a lot stronger. I think being able to see this world from different perspectives.
Which, yes, is an incredibly important part of your book. And you have a forbidden area.
Oh,
forbidden
yes.
zones where you're not allowed to go. So tell us
Yes.
about that and what that means.
Yes, I won't
be
say
right back.
everything about it because we do, again, some of that. Actually, is that all resolved in part 5? I don't completely remember, but I think it is. But yeah, so basically, in the dominant, ethnic class, the Dorans, there are still things that they're there are things that they're doing to subject the other people that they don't want sort of the normal everyday people to know about. Specifically like the guards, the soldiers, the people that are enforcing their rule. So there are some things that are off limits or that are just tucked away, and that is one of the things that when the characters that we're following that are part of that group, when they do go and see some of the dark things that are happening, that is also helping them to question their perspective and where they stand on things.
Right. And I guess it's important to note, too, that in the early part of the story, after the prologue, each character does have a motivation for wanting out in some way. So, and I would say this is, I think with Jensen especially, and almost a whimsical choice on his part, right? Isn't he kind of like, what the heck, but there's still a desire for change,
I would say it's not exactly whimsical. It's that what matters to him most is protecting the people closest to him. And so he kind of, before he expanded that out into, I'm going to be a soldier and I'm going to protect my country, my people. And then when he starts to realize there's some dark things happening there, he's able to question that, because at the end of the day, what he really cares about is protecting his
well,
own.
I guess what I meant to say is
his family is, his sister is going to be a rebel. He's like, okay, well then I will be too, because I'm here with you.
Right. What I meant to say was, like, he was the least obstructed by that decision. He was quick. It was an easier decision for him at first, like you said, whereas the others had to kind of build their will to that decision, and with a little bit more of a consequence.
Right, he has the least to lose out of all.
Right. Yeah. That's what I meant. Maybe whimsical wasn't the word I was looking for, but yeah, those early rubs with the native culture, and Heath did a great job of explaining how each character kind of fits in class and identity group wise, I guess you could say. And it also lays the foundation for what the motivation would be, maybe to leave or to get out or to try to invoke change in their life. Yep. Which I'll just point out is to join the army. For a lot of the main characters, they join
at first, yes,
right at first, but that's kind of in a way the call to adventure. That's what really moves them.
Call to adventure, and I was going to say, I wanted to know if you agree with this, because I almost feel like that's a captivity bargain too.
So it could be viewed as that. So I have some notes on that. It was crazy because sometimes I'm in a new habit of like watching movies again and not analyzing them. So
I feel like I can take a break now from that.
Well, I almost had to like retrain myself to just sit back and chill and watch a flick. But so some early stuff I think did get by me. I was just reading. However, as I went on, I did realize that you have done a great job, subconsciously of there are some clear hero's journey structural elements and archetypal designs.
Mm-hmm.
And there are also clear heroine's labyrinth designs as well. And this book really fuses them. And what's interesting is this book, I think from an overview, would mirror the hero's journey in many ways. And yet you still have this thing settling. Like, for instance, there's a departure and a return.
Yeah. Some characters have more of the hero's journey and some have more of the heroine's labyrinth. Sorry, I just want to say it, but
totally.
Yeah,
totally. So yeah, you have a departure and a return. And for those who don't know, the hero's journey is almost defined by this in many ways. Joseph Campbell has 3 main phases. The first phase is departure, and the third phase is return. I mean, it's very clear that this is and it's a warrior / hunter's journey. Mm-hmm. To go out and face a militant, cultural annihilating enemy. And that is present in this story too. When they join the Dorish Empire here, they are agreeing to this. It is a soldier's journey in that case. So you do have that warrior oriented outlook on what they're undertaking. Which, by the way, I can't tell you how many times I've read books and I could tell the author has no real sense of military structure whatsoever. And it's really irritating to me. I did get a sense of a military environment, of a military.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah, military camp. If I had any complaint, it would be sometimes they had a little bit too much freedom to move around. But that's a real nitpicky thing for me to point out. Mostly, I felt that this was there was a tactical sense. That's something that's almost missing in writing today. And I had a good feeling. Like I felt like I was a part of a military camp over multiple scenes from multiple different perspectives. So I really appreciated that. And that's important if you're going to try to establish any power in the archetype of the departure and return in the hero's journey. You have to believe that you are on a warrior's journey. And I think that this book does a great job of that as well. You also have training sequences.
Yes.
Which is very competency. I've zeroed in as a very important part of the hero's journey. The hero starts at this small level and then gains certain physical competencies.
Yeah, you're right. That's a big part of this. I didn't think about that.
Yeah, it is. In fact, I think I wrote there's a whole training sequence with Lisa and Kindy. Even.
Yep.
I just said her name wrong. I'm thinking about it. I wasn't thinking about it.
Sorry.
When I think about it now.
Just think it's
Lucia.
It's Lucia. It's Lucia.
Yes.
Well, you know what? I just realized that I was reading it as how was I reading?
Was your AI voice reading it differently?
I think I was reading it as Lacia.
Yeah.
But Lucia. Anyway.
When I was reading it, I was always saying Lasia. It's Lucia. It's Lucia.
Yes. It's
Yeah, Lucia. I like Lucia. But so you have training sequence, and it's funny. I even notice in your language, you use the language that I zero in on. So it must be in the ether there. But you're like, you talk about competency in the chapters during the. I'm like, oh man, she's right on it. Like that's what this is about. It's about gaining competency in a harsh, unforgiving world. Like if you aren't competent, you will be destroyed. And I felt that you took that seriously as a writer, but the characters took it seriously as well. These are classic hero's journey elements. Traveling further outward. In fact, part 3 is called The Wild. And I should have grabbed my Joseph Campbell book, but he's very clear what he means when you pass a threshold on the departure. He says you are moving from like a controlled civilized space outward into jungle, ocean, desert, the untamed wilderness. And you have that here. And what's interesting with Brianna's book is when she gets there, multiple characters move out into the wilderness for independent reasons at the same time. So it's very nicely balanced in that sense.
And one of the things
Joseph Campbell.
One of the things. Was there anything else you wanted to say on that note, Heath? Because there's another topic that brought up for me. But
no,
go ahead.
Go ahead. I got tons of things to say, but go ahead.
I know. We'll throw it back to you for a second. But I feel like this is a nice segue.
No, go ahead. Go ahead, Bree. No, go ahead.
One of the things that it was so fun for me, like having all these conversations with Doug about the Heroine's Labyrinth, because it had already been, by the time we're talking, it had already been, a couple years since I had written this book. So obviously I didn't know any of these archetypes. I barely, to be honest with you, was not even all that familiar with the hero's journey. I only really knew it vaguely. Like I wasn't thinking about it when I was writing.
That's beautiful.
Yeah. So I would say one of the things with my process for this one too, very, very strongly, I was being led intuitively. Like I feel like with a lot of the time when I write books, like I'm my intuition leads in order to create the world. But then when it comes to crafting the plot and all that, I'm much more left brain because it's like, especially like writing a screenplay, like things have to line up in certain ways at certain points. But I feel like my process was kind of the opposite. When I was writing that book, it was the opposite. And I think it's because it's such a complex story that it's like, we think about intuition as being like much more complicated, like processing, I suppose. And I think I had to lead intuitively in order to write the story. Otherwise, I couldn't have been able to keep track of all of the threads that were going on. It was just part of the reason why I kind of am caught off guard when you asked me some of these questions, because I'm like, some of this a lot of this I was doing a lot more intuitively than I typically do when I write a story. But anyway, all that to say, one of the things I thought was kind of interesting when I was looking back on it after all of our conversations about Hero's Journey and Heroine's Labyrinth, is I noticed that are two so when the two parties go off into the wilderness, the two girls, their journey is shorter. And they end up coming back into the native culture a lot sooner than the guys do, and of course they're the revolutionaries. They're the ones which is a very Hero's Labyrinth thing going on.
Yes,
the one that goes and is the two characters really that are mostly defying the culture itself are the two main characters, the two heroines. But then our two male characters, our two major ones, that have a point of view character,
and they're also kind of members of the native culture in a sense.
You're talking about the
male character, Jensen.
Yeah,
right?
Jensen, especially Jensen.
Right.
But those two have a much longer journey, like outside of the native culture. Their other journey takes about twice as long, and they're the ones that end up going up against a big monster and having to.
I was going to say monster combat.
They had a big monster combat moment. Yeah,
is classic Hero's Journey stuff. Yeah. And by the way, I have to say, your Policius, I freaking love that thing because it was so new. And you time and time again in your book, and I can probably pinpoint several others, but I'll just start talking about it here and keep bringing it up as it comes up. But what I appreciate about your writing, what I appreciate about your chapters, is I never got the sense that you're springing something on me to make something interesting. Like, you took time. Nothing shows up in here and just vanishes. Like it wasn't like some creature just popped up and dude, this creature shows up. This creature was a problem. This creature continued to be a problem.
Yeah.
And I love some of your descriptions of it. The Policius, by the way, is a very large creature that shakes the ground when it moves. It has 4 tube-like tentacles with teeth attached to it. And you describe it at some points as like when it was angry, it would like vibrate these things. And I could get beautiful images in my head of a creature that I've never heard of in my life. And I was getting great images. So that's just a testament to the excellent writing and descriptive powers that you have. And then they have to fight this thing. And it is not easy. It is not easy. And there's
consequences.
I was just going to say, another thing that's missing from modern writing, effing consequences.
I'm so big on that. Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm aware. I could tell that you're consciously like, no one's ever off the hook in my book.
Even the main character, George R. R. Martin is always talking about, like, he kills off his characters, right? He's famous for that. My attitude is, if I don't kill off the character, there should be damage, right? Like if you're going to be in really dangerous situations again and again and again, and you're going to survive, you're still not going to be the same, like physical, mental, psychological trauma. Something's going to be different. And if not, I can't believe it as a reader. I stop feeling like they're in danger if bad things don't happen, right?
Well, and we'll get back to the Heroine's Labyrinth at some point, but in the Hero's Journey overarching Hero's Journey elements that you have here, it's worth pointing out some of these things, and it's a good discussion because you're talking, like, I noticed trauma was a big thing that I noticed as a aspect of the Heroine's Labyrinth. And it's a very different type of trauma, social stigma, real problems in the native culture. And the native culture is there for you. It's surrounding you. You don't get to escape it so easy. But one thing that really bugged me about a lot of the critics of the Hero's Journey is the absolute dismissal or flippant attitude of the trauma that the warrior goes through. And I've even heard them be like, oh yeah, then when the warrior comes back, he just ditches, his society. He withdraws, like he's a deadbeat dad. And I'm like, no, when the hero withdraws, it's because he's traumatized and is having a tough time reintegrating in society. Frodo has to leave because he just couldn't get back in. So anyway, you capture that as well. You don't treat the warrior class heroes as less important, or that their trauma is less egregious or less problematic inside. They go through some serious stuff in their hero's journey, and the consequences are high and long lasting.
And there's some real life research. I just want to mention that. I think we should come back to the topic of trauma later, but
Sure.
Okay.
Like a lot of what's happening. Actually, let me just put a pause on. I want to talk about that again later, but I want to just quickly finish something I was going to say about Policius and throw it back to Heath.
Okay.
Because there's another thing about that. So when we were discussing Dune, I'll do a quick reminder for people that weren't there for that discussion. We were talking about like what the worms meant archetypically in Dune, and because that story world deals with kind of the humankind taming nature. That was how I felt what it was archetypically. We're talking about like he has to Paul in Dune. He ends up riding the sure in a minute. Heath, I just saw your gosh. So he ends up riding the worm, right? And that I think is dealing with a theme of mankind being in control of nature and stuff like that. In this story, we have a big giant monster, and it does have an archetypal meaning, but it's connected with a different theme, of course, which is these characters are standing up against the society that is massive, especially for Castan in particular. Like when he's standing up against that monster at the pivotal moment, it is how he feels standing up to his slave master. And that's what that's supposed to mean. And so for them defeating that, it's like them standing up against the bullies and.
Well, it's interesting you say that because the Policius has aspects of a Hydra in that it's got the multiple like heads in a sense. Yeah. Now it's not like two grow back or anything, but there is still, it evokes that archetypal, the fear of this giant Hydra, something with multiple heads, it can attack you from multiple angles. There is a fear there. And anytime you have a monster, a mythical or archetypal monster like the sandworm, and it's essentially a body with teeth, that is very primal. And you had 4 of these things, so you might be hacking away at one and then another one's coming around.
Right.
You're being outflanked by the same thing, and it's pretty terrifying. Even when I was reading it, I was like, oh shit, how do you defend that? Like, whoops. You're doing a great job engaging this one, but then
another one came.
Yeah, there's another one.
Whoops.
Yeah, you're like automatically outflanked by this thing, which made it pretty. Well, as a reader, it became immediately dangerous in a way I wasn't ready for.
Yeah, I just wanted to mention that because that was one thing that even though that was, being led by intuition, that was a conscious choice, is to have those boys, their relation, especially Castan, his relationship to that monster is like him facing it is helping him go and later face his, social.
Yeah, something too large. I mean, you're outmatched. You can't really defeat this, or can you?
Oh, can you?
Right.
All
so,
right,
and I didn't know, were you wanting to go a little bit more chronologically through it, or is it
doesn't matter. It's
topical?
whatever you want to talk about.
It matters. Here was the next question I was going to have. I was going to say, Brianna, okay, so let's talk about the sexuality of the characters.
Sure.
And so why is this important? Because we explore various different sexualities through all of these different characters. What are you trying to say about this, and why is this important?
Well, so my decision specifically to make the 2 main characters queer was because this was a decision I made, again, I was like, while I was rewriting the book. There's a very common thing where you have sort of like queer coded characters, especially when you have like, this character is kind of a representation of, someone that is a bit othered in society. Like the X-Men, has often been seen as a.
I've read them a lot.
Right. And so, but one of the things that is a common kind of annoyance, I suppose, that a lot of people have is that you'll have someone that is just coded as queer, and then we leave it at that. And at one point, I was like, you know what? If people, because I wasn't consciously choosing to make it a metaphor for that, but I knew some people would read it that way. So I was like, I'm just going to make it not a metaphor. Let me just actually make them queer.
Wait. So you thought that the aberrants would be read as coded. This is
some people 100% would read it that way.
Absolutely, that would be read into that way.
Yeah. So I was like, since, and I do feel like on a subconscious level that might have been part of like, because when I wrote the first draft, I was not aware of my own queerness. Like I said, I was kind of going through that process when I was rewriting it. And so as I was, becoming more aware of these things in myself and just, in society and culturally and the kind, pop culture, how people talk about these things, I was like, you know what? Yeah, I'm going to make mine not just, I want this to not just be queer coded. Let me just make them actually queer.
Well,
that was it. There wasn't really anything deeper than that. I was just like, let me do that, and just and then whatever consequences come from the characters being that way, then I'll let the story tell me what happens next. But
now I have a kind of a side question.
Sure.
Do you view this as an LGBT novel?
I would say so, and I would say so actually pretty passionately, but it is specifically bisexual because mainly.
I was just going to say that.
Yeah,
okay.
and that is something that I will defend my bisexual sisters and brothers very strongly. It's a pet peeve of mine because a lot of times, we say something's LGBT, we're making these are 4 letters. It could be any one of those 4 letters. LGBT doesn't mean there's a same-sex romance. Doesn't mean that. If it's a same-sex romance, just say it's gay or it's lesbian or whatever, or sapphic.
Right,
so it is. I would consider that it is specifically. It is. We have 2 bisexual characters that are. And there isn't a same-sex romance in this book, but that is part of their. Kasten and Kindy both have that perspective. So.
Okay, yeah. Well, I was going to say there's a lot of bisexuality is what I was picking up on.
Yes.
Where multiple characters, multiple genders, kind of swinging both ways, and but it was also handled very, very well. There's times where I've read books and they'll include a same-sex relationship or something, and it's just not well written, or it's almost like the author isn't wants to do it so bad that they're
forcing it in. Yeah.
They're forcing it in, or they're not taking their time, and it's like the act of doing it or the act of including it seems to be the important part to the author. Yeah, I thought this was one of the best written books that I've read that had not just one, not just 2, but multiple and persistent LGBT themes that never. In fact, it got to the point early on where I wasn't even aware of it. I wasn't even thinking about it. I wasn't noticing it. I wasn't reacting to it as distinctive or different because it never overtook the story. It never seemed.
The story isn't about that. They're just the characters happen to be queer. That was kind of my approach. Is there are some characters in here and they happen to be queer. It's not about queerness. The story isn't about that. It just.
But it wasn't. But from the character's point of view, it also wasn't not about that. And I think that you were able to very skillfully, in my opinion, do the thing that's most difficult to do today, which is include characters that are going through these issues or experiencing these issues or have these feelings, and not intrude upon the story or erase part of the character or make the character one-dimensional. In fact, none of these characters were one-dimensional, and I thought it was just brilliantly done. It was one of the best books I've read with these themes included in it.
Thank you. But I was very consciously going against stereotypes too. There's a stereotype for bisexual men that they would be more promiscuous and more
Oh, I remember
and
the conversation.
That he's very shy. He's a kind of a horny teenager, you could say, but he's not he's really shy. He doesn't approach people, and so that's on purpose.
Well, you had that conversation where the one person's oh, so I guess if we dated, you'd want partners on the side. He's like, no, I would want one person at a time. So yeah, I even in the back of my head, I thought that was a stereotype a takedown.
On purpose.
But again, none of it felt like you had to do it. It never felt like, here's where I'm going to make my point. I never got that.
That's
good. And it always felt completely anchored by the character. So when the character was going through something or confused or experiencing, conflicting things, I could just go along with this character. I didn't have to I could just experience it as a reader and go along with it. It was very easy to do.
Okay, let me go back to the idea of the being an abhorrent, an aberrant as coded queer, because you have, let's say, non-straight characters who are not aberrants.
Yes.
Right. Okay, so then what's the relationship between that? Because it's not okay, if you're an aberrant, then you are non-straight. Because
there isn't a
relationship. Define that as well. So why?
They just happened to be. Like for Keston, I just decided to make him bi. There wasn't really any. I just decided to make him bi.
No, what she was saying was that
for Kindy and Lucia, that was why I made them. That was my decision to make them queer.
Well, and as I understood it, or what I thought I understood, what Brianna was saying is, I remember reading a lot in the early 2000s. I think, like X-Men, like I think she used as an example, where someone with gifts or or like something unusual about them was viewed as coded for an LGBT theme, even though the story itself never said that, never got there. They just expressed it in a similar way. And I think what Brianna's saying is that she was aware of that and decided not to make it a hint, but to be more clear-headed about where these characters stood on that, but also not to make it a one-dimensional or one-trick pony, like, and only aberrants were like this, you know. Is that what you were saying?
Yeah. Does that answer the question that you're getting at, Heath, though?
That's what I was trying to get at. Yes.
Okay.
Because I didn't want you to. I did what I was trying to not say here. I was trying to give you the opportunity to say that wasn't one-dimensional. That you were not just okay. So that wait a minute, people are going to read being an aberrant as being. We're going to talk about the word queer in just a moment. Either queer or non-homosexual, or non-heterosexual, or whichever way you want to say this. But that actually there's more to what you were writing than that. That's part of it, but then there's more to it as well. Okay. All right. So then my next question would be, what is your relationship to the term queer?
My relationship to the word queer?
Yes, because, and that's the reason I ask you about this, is because you've used this word, I think, more than in this live stream, more than I've ever heard you use this word in previous conversations that we have ever had.
That's funny.
And because I've heard you talk about this, like, you know, what's the relationship between lesbianism and queer, and why are you choosing today to talk about queerness in relationship to these characters, and what does that mean for lesbianism? For instance, what is going on here? What does this word mean?
I'm not sure if I understand the question. Let me try to answer, and then tell me if I'm understanding what you're
absolutely.
asking. Because right now, what I'm just using queer, I'm just using that as a catch-all term. So I would say queer is anyone that is not straight or cisgender. So it'd be like a catch-all term for LGBT, for other sexualities, other genders. That's how most people would use the word. So that's the only way I'm using it in this context. But in relation to, I'm not sure if I understand your question fully. You might need to ask it in another way, unless I've answered it.
Well, no. I'm wondering because in the past, when I've talked to you, you have rejected the characterization of yourself as queer, because you are lesbian. And what's this relationship? And so it surprised me. That's why I asked this. That in this particular stream, you have really seemed to embrace this term queer. And so I'm wondering what this meaning is. Why you've chosen to here? Why are we talking about queerness here instead of bisexuality or lesbianism or other things? What's the meaning of this, and what does it mean in relationship to yourself and this story?
That is so funny you bring this up. This is kind of, I guess, off topic from City of Reckoning, but I'm actually kind of glad because this has been on my mind a lot. Like today and like the last few days, I've been thinking about this a lot. I would say I've actually changed my mind about that word as kind of a pretty big mental shift for me personally. I would say, I mean, the way that I would put it is I think I was engaging in what you would call respectability politics. I didn't like the word because I didn't like its association with its original meaning being weird, and the sense of like, you know, me kind of wanting to separate myself, I suppose, from the weird ones. And I didn't like that. I liked, because especially for me personally, like my experience is pretty simple. I'm not having any other gender identity going on. I'm just a woman that likes women. And so I like the word lesbian to describe myself because it's very simple and it fits into a strict category. And I tend to like things that fit into categories. And I didn't like the word queer before because of the fact that it was so amorphous. And I've come to realize that was kind of not very wise of me. It was kind of I think a lot of queer people kind of go through a stage of like trying to be the respectability politics, you might say, like, oh, I'm not like those people. I'm not like those really weird ones. And I've come to realize that I don't feel that way at all. And I will very passionately defend the weirdos because I am also a weirdo and I will embrace that. So I am no longer opposed to that word. But yes, I do remember that. I did think I went on a rant about that word with you, and I feel differently about it now. I think that the solidarity with other people that would experience similar discrimination or even worse discrimination is really important to me right now, kind of in my political thinking. So yeah, I've shifted my perspective on that.
Well, I didn't know any of that, so I just looked at the whole Brianna character arc right there.
That was the whole character arc in the conversation right there.
Yes, pretty much. Yes, it's been on my mind a lot lately. So yeah, thanks for giving me the chance to express my shift in views. Yeah. Okay.
So then what about the relationship between gender in this book?
Ask a little bit with.
Well, there's gender classes.
Yeah, right. Yes. You're talking about that we have certain cultures who have multiple gender classes.
Oh yeah. I was just kind of playing around, I would say, with the world building in here. So basically, and if you want to know about some of the gender politics, this is so specific, but if you wanted to know more about this in my world, I have it on my world anvil. If you go to Neurasia.com, I talk about some of this stuff on there. But basically, there are like, let me see if I can remember. There are several different cultural groups in Neurasia that have different attitudes towards gender. The Masorti and the Sabani people have like more than two genders. They have different categories of basically. It's kind of a spiritual thing, but it's also a role-based thing. You know, so people that do this in society kind of have this gender class. The Dorish people, so they come from the north. In the north, it's a lot more egalitarian. And then we've got some patriarchy down in the south, and then some like matriarchy in the sort of northeast. So there's a bunch of reasons why all those exist in the way that they do. But that was just kind of me having fun. Like, what would it be like if the society was built in this particular way? What would that look like? So that's why that exists. It was just fun to world build. But also specifically, I will say for the Sabani and Masorti people with those gender classes, that was inspired by historical, there are a whole bunch of different indigenous groups throughout the world that have approached gender in a similar way to that. So I was in that case definitely drawing from real life, but I was playing around with it in my own way.
Okay, let's go to Sable Phoenix. Sable Phoenix for $20. Thank you very much for the super chat, Sable. Sable says, for Brianna, then genuine curiosity here, not meant to be baiting or leading or anything negative. But if queer is an umbrella term that works for anyone non-straight, etc., why have the LGBTQ at all, in your opinion? If you and I sympathize, don't care for categories, why not just have a single classification, for lack of a better word? Means you just don't fit into the expected traditional roles.
I would say both of those have different purposes. Like if I say LGBT, I literally mean lesbian, gay, bisexual, and trans, right? Like I specifically mean one of those four categories. If I'm saying LGBT, I'm talking about one of those four. If I say queer, I might be talking about those. I might also be talking about like non-binary, which some people would say is part of trans too. So maybe that's already combined. But so I might be talking about something else as well. I'm just speaking more broadly. Also, queer is one syllable. LGBT is four. So sometimes it's easier to think. And sometimes it's literally just that shallow. LGBT is as easy to write, but queer is faster in speaking, especially if you're like LGBTQ plus. It's like, okay, this is too many syllables. I sometimes, that's really the main benefit of saying queer is that it's faster. So yeah, I hopefully that answers your question, Sable. If I didn't, feel free to follow up. But yeah, that's my perspective on that. It's just, I like to be precise unless I need to be vague, then I will be vague.
Yeah, there's an advantage to an umbrella term, and then there's an advantage sometimes to a specific term.
Exactly.
And I think each has their time and place, in language, when you're communicating.
Right. That's why I like the word sapphic. It's a somewhat casual
I've noticed
term.
you've used that word a lot.
Yeah, because that includes lesbians and bisexual women. So that's women that love women, whether exclusively or not. So that's a useful term in some situations, right? Like someone might be, it may not be a lesbian book, but it may be a sapphic book because maybe one of the characters is bisexual, but they still it's a same-sex romance. So that different word, I'll use the word that I feel is best for the situation, that communicates most clearly what I'm trying to say.
Do you think the message of this book is, or do you think the sexuality of the book is important to its message?
No, only on a, I would say, sort of like symbolic level, in the sense that, you can make
it doubles up on a theme that's already there, right?
Exactly. You can say that, you can draw that comparison to some of the things I'm talking about there to queer issues, but that is not the only way you can interpret it. Of course, it's also, there's also racial issues that are a very big part of this. You can compare it. It's meant to be universal. Like I'm talking about, universal human issues that we've been dealing with from the beginning of time. Is like one group of people oppressing this group of people. How do you respond? How do you respond to that kind of evil, and how far should you go in order to get justice and things like that? So I do think in terms of talking about the overall theme of the story in depth, to talk about that in depth, we should wait until we finish it.
Okay.
But,
okay. Well, fair enough.
Yeah,
fair
I would
enough.
say not. It's
We'll
not.
hold
It's
that
not
to part two.
essential.
There will be part two. So there will be.
I personally felt that the sexuality of the characters just was part of the characterization. I didn't feel like there was any main point being made or anything intruding into the story. It definitely seemed like these were just the characters, and this is how they were expressing themselves, and I got used to it pretty quick. And the story itself had all the other themes in there, and they were the dominant parts, as a story should be. So I had zero problem with it.
Brianna, what is your relationship with all these different characters? What
is my relationship? What do you mean?
There's a little bit of you in every character.
Right, because oftentimes we talk about ourselves
on the internet.
different characters, right? How do we, when you are writing these characters, which are a lot of them, and a lot of them come, and they are all different point of view story chapters, which are constructing a character arc. How do you relate to all of these characters?
Very valid question, but respectfully, I plead the fifth. I'm going to not answer that one.
Yeah, I feel like I got off easy with the faraway bird discussion.
Yeah, you're like, oh, it's just a historical character. Yeah. I think that's one of those ones I prefer not to answer. I would rather people be able to see themselves in the characters, relate to them in whatever ways they do.
Well, and to be honest, when there's always a little bit of you in every character, but
for sure,
the character becomes the character, and it really, the part of you that's in there, it becomes the part that is shared with everybody, and everyone can relate to. And so right. That's why that's a hard one to answer in general, I would say.
Mm-hmm. Oh, it's an easy one for me to answer. I just would rather not. I choose not to.
Okay. And then what were your most direct inspirations for this novel?
My most direct inspirations for this novel. Geez, I'm not actually sure if I know the answer to that, because it has been so long since I've been in the mindset of writing the book. So I don't know. I can answer that for things I'm writing right now. Let me see if I can think of anything. I'm gonna have to say I don't remember. I don't remember. It's too long ago right now. Sorry.
But you don't even remember what you watched as a kid that would influence you and this kind of thing?
There was a lot of things influencing. Honestly, I feel like I was probably more influenced by studying history than by specific stories. Like for this book, there's a lot that inspires me when I just read about how did humans live in the past and things that happened. And I think I was drawing from a lot of historical things. I I don't remember, man. The process for writing the story goes further back than the 7 years I was actually writing it. So the inspiration was even before that.
A lot of times you're champion. You have the idea as a child, even. And
then the first inspiration for the world started when I was literally a child. So
and then the idea evolves as you get better as a creative, and then. I remember dreaming about writing the Byzantine Empire when I was a sophomore in high school. So, you have tons of things feeding into that as the idea evolves into something more complex.
I mean, I guess I can make the obvious one. Of course, Tolkien influenced me.
Lord of the Rings.
Obviously, mainly just in the sense of the kind of effort that he put into building a world. That was definitely inspiring me. I wanted to have an immersive experience. I wanted it to be like you're just like swept up in this world and that you could believe that it was real. So I was putting a lot of effort into giving it the right kinds of details, giving the characters the right kind of details, that it would feel alive in its own way. For sure. But yeah, I'm sorry. I'm not best at answering that one.
Sorry, I just read.
Great question. Great question. I could answer that for literally any other story I'm working on, but I just don't remember.
Was the Policius inspired by Lovecraftian imagery in your head?
This was pre-Lovecraftian.
Ah, interesting.
That was a long time. I was like a teenager when I made that one up, or like a young adult creature.
What draws you to this particular era of technological development?
Oh, what a great question. Let me try to think how to answer that. I mean, I've always loved the ancient world, like specifically like the Roman era ancient world, which was a lot of what was inspiring this book.
So Roman and ancient world inspired this.
Yeah, but also like North Africa and West Asia, so like down all the way to Persia, and then of course there's a little bit of other parts of Europe, ancient Europe that's coming in from influences as well.
Okay.
Oh, sorry. I don't know. I've always loved that era.
Can I ask a question intersecting right into that?
Sure.
How much international or even United States travel had you done before writing this?
Oh, that's a great question. Yeah, because that's another thing that inspired me. Almost every environment in that world is based on when I'd been physically in.
I could tell. That's why I'm asking this.
Yeah, and it's bothering me because there's an environment that I'm going to visit in the next book that I haven't been in physically. We're going to be in a jungle, and I'm like, I've never been in a jungle. How am I going to write about it? So that's a fun one to answer. I could tell you about which each environment is inspired by. So the one that we're in most of the time, the Masoria Savan, the Dorish Empire, that is a hybridization of Colorado and Virginia. So Virginia is where I grew up. I spent most of my life there. And then Colorado, of course, when I was writing it, I visited it a lot, and then I live there now. And then the desert, I've been in several different deserts. I was in the Namib Desert, which is one of the most just insane wild deserts in the world. And I was climbing those sand dunes. That's how I knew what it felt like to climb a sand dune. And then, of course, different parts of the I would say the desert there is kind of a combination of the Namib Desert and like Arizona with like the arches and the rocks and stuff like that. And then of course, the Grand Canyon. So the Grand Canyon influence that when you go to Juro and they're in that massive canyon, that's from the Grand Canyon. The Ashlands is inspired by Yellowstone National Park. Yeah, Yellowstone National Park. So I visited that as a teenager. Like the smell and like just the general feel and like the very colorful lakes. It's Yellowstone National Park. I guess that's all the environments, right? Because we also go to the that makes me think of another influence. So when we go to the city that's underneath the mountains, so that was not inspired by a real place I'd gone, but that was actually inspired by one of the Narnia books that I read as a kid. Was
one of the most imaginative settings by far. It was awesome.
Thank you. But yeah, that there's a scene. Oh God, which one is it? Someone help me in the comments if you can remind me. Is it the silver chair? I think it's the silver chair where they have this
silver chair. Sable Phoenix is saying silver chair.
Yes, and that had a very strong impact on me. Like just that part really inspired me, and so I was definitely like taking what inspired me there and just like expanding it. running with it. So that would be all of the inspiration for
one of my favorite descriptions you had came from your desert setting. You described the place where the Policius came out of the sand as a spilled bag of flour. I was like, I could totally see it. Like, this is beautiful. Like, I'm not even there. I'm getting it. So I definitely had a strong sense I had a strong sense that you were drawing on real life experience from wilderness settings, because one of your jobs as a writer is to pick out one or two details that are not obvious.
Right.
And introduce them, because anyone who's walking through a forest and like, trees and moss and overturned logs and blah, blah, blah. What else? What can you bring into this that I'm not thinking of, that the general layman doesn't know about, that you do because you trudged through a forest and you're like, that's what pine needles look like in this situation, or, whatever, or the mushrooms, like you said. So
I need to get to a jungle somehow in the next year.
Yeah, you'll have to do it. Now
there aren't any in the United States.
There's one rainforest in the United States, and it's in Washington State.
Oh, interesting.
So there's an actual certified rainforest in Washington State somewhere. So you'll have to look that up, or if someone can look it up, they can help me out. But that's one. Or you maybe just take the plunge and do some sort of guided tour.
I really want to go to the Amazon. I don't know if I can do that next year.
Brianna.
Yes.
You can read books and pull some information out of those.
You have
to. I read and took vast notes about jungles.
Yeah.
By reading, because I've never been to a jungle yet either. There's these great books about explorers that have gone into the Amazon, and they're super detailed, and chapter by chapter, you're exhausted by the amount of dangerous life, inch by inch, in these freaking
you have to send that to me afterwards.
I will. I'll dig them up, because I have very specific books that I read that were super detailed about traversing a jungle, and how freaking awful it is. And how there's no food anywhere. That
sounds better than actually being in a jungle. Because I feel like I'm going to despise the experience of being jungle.
You would,
but for the research, man.
You would gain a ton as a writer, but because your imagination is so well, highly evolved, you could read a book from someone who's been there and absolutely pull something out of that.
Okay.
Daniel says he's lived in the Amazon, and he highly
recommend it. Oh my god.
What?
I have my brother and dad went to the Amazon. I tried to get information from them, but they're not writers, so I couldn't get the details I was looking for. I was like, but what does it feel like?
Well, you just put stuff in your shopping cart, and then it shows up at your door. That's my experience of Amazon.
Oh,
yes, of what happens with Amazon. Okay, Brianna, let's talk about religion.
Okay.
And its influence on this story, and what your relationship to religion is, and as it manifests in City of Reckoning.
As it manifests in City of Reckoning.
Yes.
Sorry, I'm just trying to remind myself of the book real quick. I guess religion plays a somewhat small part, but it's definitely part of the story. Oh yes, I think the most important thing about with religion as it pertains to the story has to do with the religion in the dominant culture, the Dorish people. And how they use their religious beliefs to justify the order. They have this idea of sacred order. Order and balance is very important in their religion. They have this star. I forgot how many points it has. It's been too long.
I think 8, right?
I think you're right. 8. And each one, and there's a different deity that is, on either end of the star. They balance each other out. They're these different concepts of whatever, different binaries, I guess you could say. So that's something that's very important to them. And so for Kindy, for part of her experience of, questioning her values, she does end up questioning sort of the whole religious aspect too, in the way that you would, I guess, in an ancient world. Because, it doesn't really, one of the things that she's taught is that, someone like her is going to go to a different afterlife. And she's like, okay, she doesn't really accept that. Jensen does. Jensen's a very casual. I would describe him as a pretty religious guy. He's kind of, it's just kind of part of it, in the sense that in a very Greco-Roman way. Like you have these rituals that you do, and you got to make sure that you're honoring the gods. And hopefully they'll give you blessings and help you on your journey, kind of a thing. But yeah, that's another thing that's very fun to play with, is because religion is very important to culture, and it often is where people, how people codify their values, and I think if you're trying to understand like how a culture, because culture isn't just like how people dress and what food they eat. It's like how they think and how they and why. Like, it's their social. It's how they interact with each other and why. And so, in order to develop a culture, I feel like you have to engage with that element too. There's each culture here has their own religious beliefs, and of course, I spent more time developing the ones that we spend more time in. So the Masorti and the Sabani, they have their own beliefs as well.
Okay, but your relationship with religion changed while you were writing the story, correct?
That's true. So
how is that reflected in the novel?
I don't think it's reflected that much, except for the fact that the main character kind of goes through some questioning of her own. So that was probably a subconscious bleeding in to the story of my own experience. But unless there's something that you're picking up on that I'm not even aware of.
When
I was a beta reader for this book, it had Jesus in it. I mean, Jesus showed up in the book.
I forgot about that. You're right. It was a Christian story at first.
Jesus was in this book when I read the original beta version of it.
Well, there was a metaphor. There was an Aslan type situation. I forgot about that. That was so long ago.
so your
blocked it from my
religious
memory.
change has influenced the story, because like I said, you spent this over 7 years. I mean, this is 7 years. So I mean, this is not 6 months of your life. I mean, this is a significant chunk of your life, and during your life, you undertook a radical change to your approach to religion, sexuality, these kinds of things.
Yeah.
So from when the first draft of this to what we're talking about to what we're talking about now, I mean, that's been influential, hasn't it?
For sure. No, you're right. That is what you're getting at. You're like, there's something else, Brianna. You don't remember it. Okay. That's so fun. Yeah, because it wasn't just the fact that I was writing this over the course of 7 years. It was like the most, I can't say this is the most influential. I have only lived 30 years.
You haven't finished your life.
7 years of my life. But it was, our 20s, like your early 20s, mid 20s, I think is for anybody, you're going through a lot of change and figuring out who you are. And so I was going through that kind of process while writing a coming of age story. So yeah, that's why it took so long. It was kind of rough. But
what did that influence? Yeah. So the changes that you went through in life,
yeah,
we can talk about sexuality, we can talk about religion, which is like as you were writing this over 7 years, how did that change the story? Like what does that mean? Like when you were like writing the drafts that like had the Aslan situation, like then what happens in your life? You're like, no, this is the story has to change. What's that like?
It didn't reflect my worldview anymore. So you're asking me questions that for me feel like so long ago now. So it's hard for me to even remember. But I mean, it was really just like I had a story in front of me that I didn't really relate to anymore. I didn't really agree with like certain details of it anyway. Like the core characters and the core sort of archetypes that I was drawn to were the same. But yeah, I mean, I was, beforehand, before questioning my religion, everything I was writing was supposed to be, because the Spirit told, and at least the environment I grew up in, that everything you write is supposed to be to help, it's supposed to be religious, it's supposed to do things for the kingdom of God. So that was kind of like my obligation. But then I was figuring out what it was that I actually had to say. Like, what is it that I actually want to say? And so this was my first time writing a story where it was like my own voice. And the first draft wasn't, but by the 7th, it most certainly was.
Well, how does this current book, as it's published, contrast with what you were brought up in religiously?
This is like a more personal question.
Well, you're welcome not to answer. You're welcome not to answer.
No, it's okay. I'm just taken off guard. To be genuinely honest, I don't fully remember. If you remember like what was going on in the early drafts, feel free to say, but I also kind of would like to let that be buried and
okay, well, that's fine too.
If that's okay.
They are abandoned drafts for a reason.
yeah, exactly. Yeah. I think there was some sort of redemptive quality in the original story about, her needing an outside force that was going to help her, kind of a thing. And that is not where I went. Instead, I ended up, really, really driving into the questions of, I guess the ethics of revenge and radicalization and things like that. But I'll save some of that for once we finish the book.
Okay, for part 2. Okay,
yeah,
but I mean, can our experience, can what we do as an author be anything other than our own experience?
I don't know. It's a deep question. Probably not.
You can. The question is, are you successful at it? Did you do a good job? Were people responsive to it? Did you do your homework? Like I wrote with Empress Theodore, I wrote a lot of stuff that about a woman's life. I couldn't have written that by myself in a vacuum. I needed a lot of input to do that. So I think you could do it, but I think it's a risk. Like all art is a risk, but do your homework. Do the best you can to understand the reality of what you're trying to write about. And the reason is so you can write a good story, so that you have a good character. It should matter to you as an artist to get it right. But I definitely don't believe in the only write about, what I think that you can. I think it's actually a great exercise to expand beyond your own horizon and to try to put on somebody else's shoes through the process of writing. And I changed a lot of my perspectives and thoughts while writing Faraway Bird, for example. What do you think about that, Brianna?
Well, I would say, like, for me, I think what draws me to writing so often is writing about different people's perspectives and trying to understand what it's like to be in another person's shoes, especially writing like a deep point of view, like which City Reckoning is. Like, you're really in these characters' minds, and a lot of them are very different from each other, and they have different values, they have different ways of interacting with the world, and that to me is like part of the joy of fiction, is that ability to and nonfiction sometimes, but just that ability to experience something that is outside of yourself. But at the end of the day, I think, and rather than writing what I think what you should write is what inspires you. So whatever it is that draws you, if it's personal, great. If it's not, great. If it intrigues you and it compels you, then that's what you should write. That's why.
Right. Regardless of whether, the powers that be say you should be writing it or not, I think you should, go for it. Like you said, I think that's a great extra rule or guideline. That it should come from you, from a source of inspiration first and foremost. And I think if that is your guiding light, then you'll probably be fine. You'll probably make it, or at least make something authentic to your self-expression.
You'll have more passion about it. You'll end up putting more of your heart into it because it is something that you care about for whatever reason that may be.
Yeah, whatever reason, who knows?
It does depend on what your meaning is, but about your experience. And I guess that's where I was going with this, because
I think
like there is no possible, in a certain sense, in a very direct and most meaningful sense, there is no possible way that Doug can understand what it is meant to be a Byzantine woman. Okay, so then you're like, okay, you cannot. Now, but Doug can read a bunch of material about that. And as a result of having read a bunch of material about the Byzantine Empire and
used your imagination
that having read that is very influential on you, and therefore I am writing the story. So when I'm talking about your personal experiences, my personal experiences, as I was considering it, certainly has to do with what you are reading and you are involved with. Yes, I know that, like, when I am writing about Clovis, that I understand that I am not a pagan Britain prior to the Roman Empire. Like, I have no personal experience with that, but that my engagement with that
that you know of,
that I know of, but that my engagement with that, for having read it, certainly influences me.
Well, but what happens, so you're inspired by that, and you start to put it on a page, which is hard. And that's something I think Brianna did a good job with. All the writing is clear. There's clarity there. So fully realize, fully imagine scenes. So when you're putting something down, you might find yourself writing about something that's beyond your experience. So the first thing you're going to do is write what you think it would be like. And then you're going to ask for some outside opinions from people who might have a better understanding of something than you. And they'll tell you.
I did a lot of that too.
Right. If
I
there's
had, like, sensitivity readers and stuff.
Yeah, exactly. Especially when you're dealing with trauma. So you start to refine it. And then what happens is the person you're writing about on the page is more real than you ever imagined. And now you're the caretaker for this scene and this person and what they're going through. And if you care, and artists care, you'll do everything you can to get it right. You'll do everything you can to make sure that this is right. What you're putting on the page.
Authentic. I feel like the word I like is authentic. Like, because some experiences, they can vary. They can, what is it? Okay, what does it feel like to be bisexual? Like, I'm not bisexual, but lots of people have different experiences being bisexual. And so there isn't like one universal thing that I'm trying to.
But step one is to try to imagine it, right?
Yeah, but hopefully it comes across, like these two characters that have that. Hopefully it comes across as authentic, as this you can imagine a real person would have an experience like this, and not real people do, and things like that. And you have to have the space, especially in the development, to get it wrong once in a while. I can't tell you how many times women pointed out, like in Faraway, like, Doug, your description here is so obviously a man writing about like sexually provocative. Well, I'm like, yeah, she's hot. And they're like, yeah, it sounds like that. So I would read it through there. I'm like, oh, I think I see what they're talking. So I'd have to take out a bunch of work. The less Doug and the more just raw, creative human being that you are is on the page, the better the art usually is. You have to kind of remove yourself somewhat. You want your human experience in there and human imagination, but you also don't want too much of yourself intruding on what might be a better story. Yeah, in a negative way. Thinking. Right, exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sable for $20 wants to contest my opinion.
He wants to contest.
Sable says,
"Ooh, nice!
For $20. Thank you very much, Sable." Sable says, "I will contest that, Heath. The key with authorship or role play is that you take your own human responses, which are universal, and feel in your senses the responses you would have in a particular situation, even alien ones."
That's your starting point. You have to start there, and it's a reliable starting point. But it may not be the end point. Because
people have different experiences too. Like our emotions are universal, but what emotions we might experience in a different situation could be different depending on who you are, depending on your personality, etc.
Yes.
And Bacon Gaming says humans can relate to human experience, even the ones they themselves have. Sable Phoenix says exactly. But I don't feel like this is in contrast to what I was saying. I think this is it.
I don't think so either.
What I was saying.
Well, I think Heath more asked the question. I don't think Heath made a blanket statement or anything.
It's what I was saying, that if you solely constrict your experiences to those you have physically had.
Oh, yeah, you won't write anything.
Then you are right. But if you were saying that, can you write things about but my human experience has been to deeply dive into the Byzantine Empire, then that's part of my human experience. My human experience was not to live in the Byzantine Empire. I did not do that. But part of my human experience has been to deeply involve myself in the literature of the Byzantine Empire, and this comes out in my creative work. That's what I was saying.
Right.
That I should include. I was arguing that we should include my experience in, for instance, Byzantine literature in what I would consider my human experience. That's what my argument was.
Right.
If that makes sense.
Well, yeah, I mean, you're pulling from a lot of different things. You're pulling from Lord of the Rings. You're pulling from Star Wars. You're pulling from those 9,000 books you read about the Byzantine Empire. You're pulling from your own personal experience. And, there are universal aspects to being a human that, there's a great quote, and I need to find out who said it, because this quote has actually been in the back of my head for decades, or at least 15 years or so. And the quote was, "As I am human, I understand all that there is to be human." So what that means is I can read a book about someone's experience from a person who might not be anything like me, culturally, gender, like it doesn't matter. Because I'm a human being and this person who wrote it's a human being, I should be able to connect with this person. I should be able to find common ground there.
Well, that's that if that's true, then the humanities are a valid subject of study. Like the validity of the humanities as a valid subject of study depend on what you just articulated, Doug. If that's not true, then there is no such thing as the humanities.
Well, and my big rule is it should not be divisive. It should be something that we find common ground on, that we see eye to eye, that we're like, hey, you might be different than me, but we can connect. I can still connect to you. I shouldn't feel cut off from somebody.
Can I connect through time, through space, and through time?
Yeah, and there's another thing too I want to add on that note is that I feel that, how do I put this? It's usually the things that separate us as human beings are always these surface level things. You know, like our differences in personality, our differences in experience that are like on this just, you know, all these labels that we give for ourselves and all this stuff, you know, these, like, it's very, very surface level, but the deeper you dig into what is really, really personal, into like the emotions you feel, the ones that feel private that you think no one else has, that is where you get the most universal. It's like at that fundamental level, that's where you find connection with other people. Like when you think it's the most specific to you, it often ends up being the most universal.
I have a secret theory that art and creativity are exercises in that kaleidoscopic, you know, like when you're writing City of Reckoning, you are being 15 or 20 different people.
Right.
You know, and you like when you're writing, you are those people. You're really trying to articulate what it is to be this person and that person, and then you're switching to this person, and they have different worldviews, and you as the author are catching all of this and trying to put it down and articulate it clearly so that Heath can read it or I can read it. That's why I think that creativity is so important, because I think it's an exercise in the part of humanities that Heath is describing, that connectivity, even connectivity amongst differences, you know, things that are different than you or people that are different than you.
Yeah.
So, Brianna, if you are thinking about your novel in the context of the humanities, do you think are the eternal not eternal, let's say universal messages or universal themes, let's use that, universal themes that your book is trying to deal with that makes it a human universal?
Suffering, I would say, and specifically, I mean, trauma, but also suffering in the face of, you know, mistreatment from other people, and the responses that we have from that. Yeah. And I mean, there's lots of other ones. Like, that's the main thing. That's kind of the core of the story. That's like fundamentally what it's about. But it's also, you know,
suffering.
Yeah. More trauma was the word that was like my North Star when I was rewriting it, was that I was writing a story about trauma specifically.
What does trauma mean to you?
I would say trauma would be like, it's the mental version of, you know, having a broken leg or something like that. And
way worse than that. Yeah.
Well, specifically it's, you know, let's say you're in a sport, and let's say you're like in soccer or something like that, and you injure your ankle, and then you have to go and you have to sit down for a while, and you can't run because it's injured, right? And then eventually, you know, you heal, and maybe you're kind of able to limp a little bit, and you get back on your feet, and you're back into the sport. A couple years later, because it never completely healed quite right, it, you know, snaps again. You're able to be injured again, and so it's something that remains a weakness for a while. And so I would say when I'm talking about trauma in this context, I'm talking about the mental version of that, where there's something that is beyond what your brain can handle in that moment. And it can become something that you might deal with for the rest of your life, potentially. And the healing process is very messy. Specifically, like, because one of the things that was driving me to want to talk about trauma is that here's another pet peeve. I often find that the way that trauma is often shown in fiction, it's very trivialized. And
it's bad memories.
Yeah, and it's almost like
that.
It's almost made like it's cute, you know, like, oh, like in romance stories, you know, like, oh, let's give the love interest a little bit of trauma, and now he's like, oh, the poor guy, he has some trauma that makes him like, now we care about him a little bit more. Like there's elements of that, and like this is a horrible example, but like 50 Shades of Grey, like they do that kind of just this casual, like, let's just give him a little trauma, and then it's like, oh, it's like trauma is ugly, man. Like it's messy. It's not pretty. It's not cute. And I mean, that was another, I guess, another personal side that I won't get into depth, but I had a serious traumatic experience while I was writing this, some, you know, personal experience with violence and things like that. And some other things that were going on with people close to me. And so I was experiencing some of that. I was seeing people around me experiencing like PTSD and stuff like that. And seeing how other people were responding to things and how I was responding to things. And it was it's not pretty. And it can bring out some pretty dark parts of the human psyche. And so I really wanted to address that as authentically as I could. I did research too. Like, of course, there were some things there that was from real life. I also researched specifically about the psychology of killing and how that affects soldiers. So a lot of what's in there, like when these characters kill for the first time, every single one of those things is drawn from like true stories of how that affects people. And each of those characters responds differently too.
Yeah, and you did a good job with that, I want to say, because
that's what I feel most proud of in this book, most confident that I wrote authentically. Like I put a lot of thought into the psychology of the characters and how they're responding to the things they're experiencing. I do feel I feel more confident about that than anything that I've.
Well, one of the most annoying things, and you completely did not fall into this, is I hate when I'm reading a book and a character who's like a confident soldier who's been fine this whole time kills someone in battle. And then it's like the author feels like they have to, like, oh my God, I killed a guy. Now I can. And it's like, dude, I get the sense that you feel obligated to add this. When I read it, it feels like you're obligated to write. Like the author, the way they wrote it feels like they were obligated to like have like fake trauma, if you want to call it that. And it doesn't come across as authentic at all. And it's almost like an obligatory, like, oh my God, what have I done? And then they're right back to it. You did not do that. And on multiple situations, you took your time with it. And obviously you did your homework. So authenticity, it came across very, very well.
And having each character have a different response was important too. Like Jensen, for example, is not bothered by having killed someone. And that's the thing that some people have. But most people don't have that experience. From what I was reading, that's like, I don't know, it's like 5% or something. Like some people will have that experience where it's just like, and they're not psychopaths. Some people just
it's compartmentalized. I've talked to Vietnam veterans who have killed people. Yeah. And first off, they don't talk about it openly. Right. But when they do, and they don't talk about it directly, they'll usually talk about it indirectly. But when they do, it is like there's a little bit of a different persona there. There's a different persona that comes in because they're distancing themselves even from this one discuss. I remember one guy talking about how hard it is to hit somebody with a machine gun. He's like, you can have someone running right in front of you and you're just unloading and you're not hitting it. Anyway, it's just, you realize that that's part of the trauma is all those times you missed. And then the one time you didn't, and you didn't miss, you got them. These things stay with these people, so, and like you said, Brianna, everyone deals with it a different way.
Yeah. Yeah.
So Brianna, what parts of this story or the story as a whole do you believe could not be written by somebody else? Why is this story uniquely yours and only that you can articulate?
I'm tempted to answer that in a smart aleck way and say that every story can only be written by the person that wrote it. So I'm on but I won't answer it in that way, except I just did.
I was just going to say that's the perfect way to say the smart ass thing without being a smart ass. That was perfect. Well done. A smart ass would say.
No, but let's go beyond the obvious and be like, if you're talking about what the themes are of the story that you're trying to address, you have unique experience as a human
Yeah.
being that you are now bringing to this story. What is it that you are bringing uniquely to this story that you want people to know about? You're like, yes, this is mine, and this is what
I
I'm
almost
saying.
don't know if I want them to know about that though, because there's an element of like you're personally what's. I'm not saying this to avoid the question. I'm still kind of thinking about it in the back of my head. You know, a story comes from yourself personally, but I really feel strongly that it belongs to whoever's reading it, and they're going to have their own meaning. And so I don't want to over talk about myself because I don't want to take away from it being personal to the people reading it. But actually, I think I am going to leave it there. I think I am going to decline that one as well.
Okay, well then let's talk about that then.
Okay.
What is the
sure.
relationship between the story and the people who read it versus the relationship between the story and you?
That's out of her hands.
And we can generalize that to the story and the author versus the story and the audience.
For sure.
What happens?
I mean, I can answer what my relationship to it was.
Okay.
It was therapy for me. I feel like most stories are, but like it was definitely like me writing that, and I could only really see that in retrospect when I finished it. But like it was definitely me processing things, processing some of my own emotions, and making sense of them. And I sort of after writing it was like, oh, I see now why I felt so compelled to write that. Like it was very personal. Every story is personal, but I think if anyone's reading it and they have a close connection to it, it's going to be because there's, like with any story, there's going to be something that speaks to them in their own experiences. And hopefully, dang, I can't say that because what I was about to say, I want to save until we finish the book. But
there will be a part 2.
Oh, damn it. How do I say
yeah, well, we can save some of it for when we've all read the end.
Yeah. I want people reading this to to think about the questions that it's asking in terms of
what are the questions it's asking? What are the what are they? What are you asking? Because we talk about that with a theme. That a theme is a question, and then we deal with. We have people on the characters who say yes to this question. We have characters who say no.
Right.
We talk about it so often on this channel that like a theme is a question, and that the best stories have characters on both sides that you identify with, and they wrestle with this. So I'm not asking you to tell me what the answers to the questions are. We haven't even finished the book yet. But
we will discuss that later.
Yeah. But what are the questions?
Well,
what are the questions?
The fundamental question is what is the way to respond to trauma and to suffering? When someone was harmed you, if you've been the recipient of an oppressive or a bullying kind of a situation, how do you then go and find justice and restitution? How do you make things right? What is the proper way to respond to that?
So then you're exploring different methods by different characters.
Yes.
Okay. How does Leisha?
Well, we will answer this question when we finish the book.
Okay, we can't answer this question
now. No,
so that's it. So we're talking about how do you respond to trauma and suffering?
When caused by other people.
You set this up, the different let's say causes to these different characters,
right?
And they're going to respond in different ways. And now your question is, which one of these is right?
Exactly. Yep.
Okay. All right. That's fascinating. All right. So we do have to read the rest of it in order to understand. So all of these characters are responding to some kind of trauma in different ways, and our question is, which one is correct?
Specifically, Caston, Lucia, and Kindy are all having a similar level of trauma that they are responding to. Yes. Yes.
Okay.
One thing that I appreciated in the book was, I think there's 5 parts. Is that right?
Yep, 5 parts.
And I've read 4. And in fact, I've stopped at the end of 4, and 5 to the end is where we'll go next. But I appreciate your little cutaway myths and fables to start each part. Again, I've read books where it feels like the author is like trying to do this.
Yeah, you just.
And they're like, okay, so I'm going to tell you a fable. There's a sun, and the sun's, and I'm like, oh, please, stop.
Right.
Yeah.
These are all connected to the themes of the story.
Well, that and you just sense that they're just making it up because they've decided to do this. I didn't get that. I really enjoyed your fables. They sounded authentic, and they did add a compliment to the themes in the book without being direct at all. Like they weren't direct and overt and obvious, but you sense that there was that you were giving us a little foreshadowing in what is to come in the chapter. So I thought that was really well done. And again, that's a thing that's tricky because I've seen so many writers do a bad job at it.
Oh, that's a big pet peeve of mine. People like, let me just, it's like an excuse to info dump, basically. Like, let me just info dump some stuff about my world. It's like, I don't care. So the purpose of those, at least for the first 4 sections, the number 5 has a slight, doesn't follow this pattern. But I'm showing how each of the different cultures you're interacting with, how they think about aberrants and how they treat them. And so they each have a different myth about the origin of aberrants. And so that's what those are. So it's connected together thematically. Yeah.
What is how did you develop aberrants? What does that mean to you? What's your earliest memory of telling a story about an aberrant?
I'm trying to remember. Well, I remember it happened in college. I remember I had the character Kindy, and at some point I decided she was going to be winged. I think it was very archetypal. I don't think this was a super rational decision. I think it was something that came out of my gut. So I couldn't really tell you what I was thinking at the time.
What's the archetype we are developing?
Well, when
wings represent freedom.
Exactly. Wings represent freedom. And I know that now consciously. So I'm playing with that more on purpose in book 2.
Yes. Beautiful. Yeah.
Well, quite a lot is happening on purpose in book 2 and from the gut. I'm not doing that.
That's the beauty. You weave both together. Yeah. The intentional.
Yeah. I think I'm better about that now. But yeah. And also she's a dark figure too. So there's that element of, it's not just like these pretty wings. There are these dark wings and there's claws and she has night vision. And so I think she was this sort of almost like a dark feminine kind of an archetype that was coming. And it was coming out of a dark place. I was in kind of a dark place mentally when I created that. So,
I actually thought of Maleficent a little bit when I was reading this, because when I broke down Maleficent, based on our discussion here on Table Talk, Maleficent was one of the assignments. Well, and I did study it, but we reviewed it here. The wings represented her sacred fire in that film, and it was the stealing of her wings that was such a big issue in that story. And there were and by the way, I don't think you had any cross ties with Maleficent, but the symbolism was similar. And you even said at one point that a lot of the Nocturans are hunted for their wings. So there was automatically this, and this is a heroine-centric problem. This idea that you have a sacred fire and that there are others who will prey upon this or try to take it or steal it from you. And that I picked up on, or I felt that was present in this story as well. And there was a threat to that, a direct threat when she is in captivity in this story. And you had what's a word? Foreboding. That's not the word I mean. A precursor situation where there was a Nocturne spy that was captured.
Oh man, that was brutal.
Well, but it's very archetypal. So here's a fellow Nocturne. This is before Kindy is even really strongly identifying as Nocturne, but clearly a little bit. And you have a captive heroine in this, or a captive feminine character here with the wings, and the wings are damaged and beat up. And then again, you have poison. The poisoned apple is always usually associated with the unconscious heroine or the captive heroine. And what was interesting, it was a subverted theme in the sense that the poison was intentional. And what I found interesting, and I haven't got to the end of the book, so I don't know how my analysis here is going to end, but Kindy intentionally uses poison, as she does with Dothel. So there's this intentional poisoning theme that I have a theory on how this might end.
Okay.
Based on studies from other stories. And of course, it doesn't have to end the way I'm wondering about for this to be fast.
I can't wait to hear what you think when you get to the end. Then,
that's why I'm very curious, because there is an accidental archetypal subversion of this theme, which I have a theory on, and I can't wait to find out how.
I'm so intrigued.
Yeah, so I'm curious because I have a theory about Kindy, where she's going to go, where she'll end here. But
I want to ask you, but I have terrible poker face, so I'm not going to ask.
Okay.
Don't ask.
Part two.
I really want to experience it, and I don't want. I had a buddy who accidentally blew The Sixth Sense for me. The movie The Sixth Sense.
Yeah.
He's like, "There's a secret, and it's so good. You want." So within seconds, I was like,
You figured it out.
I knew what was going on, and I've never forgiven him for ruining it. So anyway, I want to experience the end because I'm curious, because I do see an archetypal pattern, and I'm curious to see where that leads. I'll just put it that way.
Yeah. Were you about to say something? Oh, sorry. You're just sipping. I'm gonna go back to my notes.
I have a bunch of notes on things that I appreciated and liked in particular.
Well, give it to us, Doug.
Well, just a few little things. A lot of stories skip this. You mentioned menstrual cloths at one point for women out in the woods, and you don't overdo it or anything like that. Like, you don't like beat this over the head, but I was like, thank you for addressing that.
It immerses you more, you know?
What's that?
It immerses you more. That's like another kind of pet peeve. Like, if it's never mentioned, I'm like, but how are these? Because I'm thinking about it as a woman. If I read like some post-apocalyptic or some traveling thing, I'm like, how are the women dealing with this? Just a mentioning helps it make it feel more real to me, you know?
Well, for like Mulan, and now I'm not blaming the cartoon for not addressing this, of course, but
yeah,
there was the live action version, and I'm like, they're not dealing with this one issue. Like, if we're going to go live action, we're going to try to make this real on some level. I was like, man, one problem a woman would have is her monthly cycle. How the hell are you going to go out into the wilderness and not tip your hand on this? Like, it's
something you have to plan for, right?
Yeah, you'd have to at least come up with a solution for. Anyway, you mentioned it. That's all I needed. To get a sense that these are characters dealing with the reality of their biological selves.
And also birth control. That was something I sort of added in to say,
for the
help
warriors.
explain.
Yes.
Right. To help explain, why they are able to have as many female warriors as they do. And that's going to be one of the reasons, is that they have a way to work around that particular problem.
But that's all I need, just to mention, to show that this is being accounted for.
Right.
Writer to reader, this is being accounted for because I've mentioned it. That's all I needed. And in a well-written book, that's literally all I needed. I didn't need to be sold on. I just needed to know that you thought about it, and you did. Another thing I really appreciated, in fact, I would say this is the first real thrill that I got in the book. And that doesn't mean the book wasn't, because the book can be captivating in numerous ways, right? Mm-hmm. It can be compelling because there's a mystery, or there's a bully, and there's a sense of injustice. But when it spiked for a thrill was the first time the army went into battle and magic started being used. Yeah. And there's a point where someone says, like, sorcery. And I literally stopped, and I was like, man, she just made the word sorcery scary. And because when you hear like a source, like, I'm literally picturing like cartoon characters when I hear sorcerer or sorcery. So when I read it in the context of your book, I was like, I personally was like, thank you, Brianna. You just made the word sorcery sound very ominous, very foreboding, and very scary again. And I appreciated that. And you did not overuse magic, another rule or a guideline.
It's kind of a low, I think it would be considered a low fantasy world. Sometimes I don't know if I'm using those terms correctly because people use them so differently, but magic is not a huge part of the story.
But it was just important. Enough.
Right. It's ultimately part of the plot. But it's not, we don't have people going around casting spells and stuff. Magic is a small part of the world, but it's there.
But it was dangerous.
Small. It's very impactful, but it's
right.
It's, you know what I mean? It's not.
Well, you kind of contextualized it as better technology in a way. Like, we're confronting an enemy with superior technology. That's a modern spin, but it sounded like sorcery was pretty scary, and you didn't want to go up against these guys because you didn't understand it yet. You didn't have a defense for it. So I thought that was very, very cool and very thrilling as a reader to get into a wartime situation and to have no answer for this magical attack upon the legions there. What's funny too is my early note for on the critical side, which I ended up kind of letting go of, was I think this is going to be predictable in the sense that they're all going to turn against the Empire. That was my early note. This turn against the Empire is very predictable. However, you took your time with it again. You didn't. It wasn't like it was set up in a dumb way. Like we kept going, and I realized like I'm on chapter 74, and I think it's just now starting to become like a major issue. I was like, I thought this was predictable, but because so much story has gone on with so many different character elements, that the fact that they turn against the Empire isn't really a problem. It's not like it's not a predictable flaw in the book as a whole, like I thought it might be, because the storytelling was so good and so patient.
And when it comes to that, I'm going to speak vaguely because this again has to do with part 5. The whole act of turning against an empire is not something one does casually, right? And so that's kind of a critique that I might have of some types of revolutionary stories where, especially if, say, you have not much to lose from it staying the same, or you have a lot to lose if things go badly. And so that was some complexity that I wanted to deal with these characters, having a different outlook on that problem.
Right. And I appreciated that as a reader and as a writer, as someone who really cares about story. I appreciated the time you spent with these characters. And the one thing that I thought was perhaps a flaw that I knew what was going to happen ended up not mattering at all, because what had happened in between my suspicion that they were going to turn against the Empire and the fact that they will, that became a moot point, because there was so much story that took place in between there that it didn't matter if I knew that or not. And
that wasn't the main thing happening.
Well, right. But that's a tip of the cap again to good storytelling, in my opinion. So anyway, I don't want to monopolize. I just want to point out some of the.
You can jump to Heath if you want. I'm going to look and see what's next on here that I haven't. Oh, I have some notes on world building. We can talk about that, or we can talk.
Okay,
about
well, we should talk about that because I mean we're going to have a part 2 on here by the time Doug and I finish the book itself, so we'll be able to talk about the entire arc. So if you are watching this live stream and you have not read the book, or if you have not finished the book, well, that's no problem. Pick up City of Reckoning by Brianna da Silva.
You won't be disappointed. You will enjoy it.
Yeah, it's on the Amazon for Kindle right now on sale, so you can pick that up.
Anywhere you can get ebooks. It's the sale is all over
on sale right now. It is on sale. That's why we actually pushed to be sure that we were covering this book right now, because there's the sale going on with all the different fantasy authors, and City of Reckoning is part of that. So you can get that right now. So pick it up, start reading it, and then in 2 or 4 weeks, or I'm not sure how long, we haven't talked about when the next conversation will be, but something like that, we will have another conversation about City of Reckoning where we finish this book, and we will have it all, and we will finish it all. So please pick it up right here. That's what's going on. All right. So Brianna, what were you just saying?
Oh, I was saying I have some notes I can address about world building.
On world building.
If you're interested.
Okay. Yeah, absolutely. Okay. Notes on world building. Go ahead.
Yeah, because we had a conversation on this channel a while ago about world building in general, and I talked a little bit about some of my approaches and how I have 2 different fantasy worlds, how I approach them very differently. I'm not going to cover that ground again, but it's out there if you guys want to see it. But I wanted to talk about some specific examples here, and some choices I made, and explain why for anyone that's interested. So for one thing, so when it comes to languages, one of the things, I think I mentioned this before, that I probably would have done differently if I was writing it now, is that so we have the two languages, the main ones, of course, that are for the two cultures that we're interacting with. So I developed a lot of those languages so that I could, sprinkle in vocabulary and things like that, and to help with the immersion. There was a time when we kind of like randomly met like the people in Juro, and I sort of like had some language there, and that was one of those things that I feel like was kind of silly. I should have just described what it sounded like instead of just trying to start developing a language, because that was all that I created for that. So I don't know. That's one of those, like, I don't know if that necessarily, I guess I'd be curious now how you guys felt as readers at that part. If you felt that added more to your immersion or not. Actually, I just want to ask that question. Like, do you know the part I'm talking about? Oh, hey, Heath hasn't gotten to that part yet.
I haven't gotten to that part yet.
When they first Kasten, Kurna, and Jensen.
Well, they encounter them by boat first.
Exactly. And there's like a moment of their miscommunication. They're all trying to like communicate with each other, and they don't know what language they're speaking. To that moment, did you feel that it worked for you having
I did, but I feel like so by that point in the story, you had earned a lot of buy-in from me, to where I wasn't questioning, does this work or not? I'm just, these are the characters, this is the boat that showed up, this is what they're saying. I was into the story at that point, so
okay,
I wasn't finding things tripping me up. And I wasn't looking for them, and B, it didn't trip me up. So I always do think it's a risk to have a character go on in a foreign language. Yeah. But again, I just bought it. I didn't have a problem with it. Could you have done it better? Maybe. I mean, you've had time to think about it, but it didn't trip me up at all.
Yeah, I'm probably just being nitpicky.
Well, the writer, I know all the weak points in my story, like where I would go back but that doesn't mean the readers felt that way. And it's usually best to just zip, just let it go. It's published. You've said it.
Okay. There was, I feel like, a more major thing to mention that I did that was like kind of unusual, not the way most people handle this kind of a thing. Is how I wanted to do it. It's really common, I feel, in a fantasy world that people will kind of like authors will sort of I guess imply what ethnicity you're supposed to imagine based on kind of cultural cues and like language cues that reference cultures in our real world. And for some reason that to me, with the kind of story I was trying to create here, I was trying to make it as ground. Like my goal with building the world of Neurasia was that I wanted to make something that you could believe would exist out there somewhere, that you could believe that these cultures might have developed in the way that they did, and that it felt like something like, this isn't real, but it could have been like you could imagine this was a part of history somewhere, right? And so because of that, I couldn't believe that. I was like, what would be the odds? This is another world. Why would they have the same patterns that we would? Why would it so happen to be that they would have some group of people that looks just like a Scandinavian person, and they have similar art and similar language, and that ruins the immersion for me. So I intentionally did not do that in this. And in some cases that might work against me because people expect that. So like, for example, the Masorti people, their language is very much inspired by Polynesian languages. And so because of that, I think a lot of people imagine Polynesians, but they're not meant to be Polynesian, right? And they're kind of more like almost like East Europe was kind of what was in my mind. And so I'll mention some of these for people that are curious. So there's like the Mashindian language, which is the language that the Dorans speak. That was very influenced by like Scandinavian languages. But then the ethnic group was supposed to look more like what we might imagine, like West Asian. So very vague, very broad, but that was kind of what I was thinking of. And then you have like in the desert area, it's much more like North African ethnically, but the language was inspired by like South Asian languages, especially Hindi. And that was just a way for me to like, I don't know, I wanted to say that this was something that would have
break up
What's that?
to break up the monopoly of one culture taking
Right.
over every aspect of the fake culture or the imagined culture.
Right. And so I don't know, that was for me, that just felt more real, but I also I feel like that might, I don't know, people might imagine things differently. So I am very cool. Huh?
It could be disorienting.
It could be, yeah. That was my
the advantage of kind of keeping all of the characteristics in the Scandinavian family is that you don't have to say it's Scandinavian, and yet we kind of can auto-populate everything else along those lines, you know.
Right.
But I think you're right. If you break it up a little bit, you get a chance to create something really like the Rohirrim in Lord of the Rings. That was so clearly like Anglo-Saxon, Scandinavian that they didn't even
but
try.
they're also Vikings on horses.
Well, Scandinavian, yeah. Well, but exactly. But you get there's like a theme to the cultural imagery and the way they dress, the helmets, and all that. And what Brianna's saying is the advantage is you get a kind of a free auto-populating.
Right.
You get how would they say? You get to have a rent-free room in the reader's imagination of what
there's
this
less
world
that you
looks
have
like.
to define as a writer. You can kind of pull off of.
You can kind of lean on Scandinavia to do all the work for you, whereas she's breaking that up so that it really puts it on her to deliver the culture as unique and
there's more work, which is fine, but it's also just I don't know. I feel that, and since then in developing other stories, I tend to do the typical thing. Like I tend to okay, this is a just because it different stories I think have different needs, and sometimes you want to just do that auto-populate thing like you just said, because that's not an important part of the story. Whereas for here, it's like having this big immersive world was one of the big goals for writing it in general. So that was why I put this extra effort into doing that. But yeah, I just thought I would share that as an interesting
very
choice
cool.
I made. Some might disagree with, but I don't know. That was what I wanted to do.
No, that's a very cool choice.
Yeah, it was. I wrote here that this was deep thinking that I did on making it feel like a real place. Because for me, it feels too fantastical / dreamlike. If a story matches our world's exact cultural patterns, it reminds me that I'm reading fiction, and that hinders full immersion. I don't know if that's always the case. I feel that it just depends on what kind of a story you're writing. So for me, this one
characters if you have good characters, you can get away with a lot.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. Yeah, that's exactly right. Just looking through my notes. Let's see. Yep, we've already covered a bunch of this stuff.
Well,
should we talk about the midpoints at all, or should we leave that for our part 2?
Well, the midpoint might be. Oh, it might be in better context with knowing the end.
Yeah, that's a good point.
So, Brianna, what have we not talked about that we should be?
That's what I'm looking at right now. That's why I just mentioned that question. Should we
what
save that for next time? I was saying talking about the midpoint. Wait, let's save that for next time.
No, but I'm talking about its themes, the cultures that you're bringing. What have we missed? What are we not talking about that you're no, this was an important part of this novel, and we haven't even brought it up. What is it?
Well, that's what I'm doing right now. I'm going through my notes. I'm going through my notes to see what it is that we still haven't talked about. So a bunch of these we already have. The only thing that I have left, I have plenty of things that I think we should talk about after we finish the whole thing.
Okay.
But I would like, if you guys are down, I feel like it would be fun. We've kind of done this a little bit, but I really would like to go through systematically a little bit our Heroine's Labyrinth archetypes and see just to see what might be there because I was having a lot of fun thinking about this.
So I have notes on it, but I swear I was man, I almost want to talk to Brianna one-on-one because she knows the story so much better, and I might be missing some cues that upon a second reading I would pick up real easily. But I did start writing some notes down on because there's I spoke early on about where the overt hero's journey tropes and archetypal designs came in, and they're there. This is not like a pure heroine's labyrinth. It has very strong hero's journey aspects to it, and yet there are heroine's labyrinth aspects as well. It's a little bit of a hybrid in that case. And a couple things that I got a kick out of was now that you've read the Heroine's Labyrinth book, the Archer Huntress.
Finished it actually today, like hours ago. Finally.
Oh, awesome!
Yeah.
Well, you remember I discussed the Archer Huntress as a common warrior class, and this book has two of them.
Yes.
Two Archer Huntresses, and I kept thinking about Karina for some reason because she was the one firing the arrows. I think we saw her use the bow more. Is that right?
Yes, that's because Lacia can fight in multiple ways, so we see her fighting in other ways as well.
Okay, yeah, because I remember with knives and a sword.
She has her like long blades and her short knives and things like that.
Okay.
Hand-to-hand combat. She can do all of it.
Right. So, and one of the things I talked about early on was the sacred fire, and it's very important for heroine, or in the books or all the stories I've studied, that there's a relationship between the heroine's personal aspirations and their culture, from where they came from. That there's this culture that was staked out before them. There's something that the culture expects in terms of continuity. And what's interesting is that Laisa, am I saying that right? God, now I'm
so
self-conscious.
One of these times in this conversation, someone will say her name correctly.
Lacia.
Put up on the screen.
God, I had no problems with it, but now I'm like completely self-conscious.
It's Heath's fault. How do you change my if I were to change the description underneath my name? I forget how to do this. Oh well, I was gonna put something.
You'll put the phonetic. Well, Lacia. Okay. Oh, well. She's more of a classic heroine in that the relationship between herself and the continuity expected of her through the native culture is classic. She's essentially a princess. The native culture has a place for her. They have expectations of her that are very clearly defined. They're culturally defined. They're ceremonially defined. You wear certain clothes. You wear this thing. Your father's the chieftain. Here's the torch. Like, it's very overt with Lacia. She's a classic princess, kind of like Moana, you could think of in a similar vein. And yet the heroine has personal aspirations. And what's interesting with Lacia is that her personal aspirations is to continue the rebellion that her father failed. He was a rebel, but that has done now. And where I've left off, she's very clearly building her will to take up I think chapter 74 ends with her having the discussion like, hey, we're doing this. Mm-hmm. We're going back to our rebel roots, and we are going to finish what my father has begun. That is that's a perfect reconciliation between the personal ambitions of the heroine herself and the expected continuity of her native culture. So that is classic right there. Kindy has a similar thing, but it's not as classic. It's a little bit more complex in that the continuity is that she is a Nocturn, right? Her the torch that is passed is the fact that she's a Nocturn. Her parents, her culture, her people are Nocturns. There's that interesting scene where there is a Nocturne attack, and she's kind of on the other side of it. So, but she has the bat wings, and the bat wings are proof that she's part of this group of people. So there's this continuity in terms of her physical personage, and yet it's also identically a symbol of her individuality. A great example of that is the Pualu stone from Moana, and also the green crystal of Krypton with Superman. It's handed to him from his native culture. It's literally a record inside the Fortress of Solitude. It's a record of his native culture's history, and yet it's a symbol of his personal individual aspiration. That's what Kindy has. I haven't got to the end of the story. I'm sensing, and this is a different sense than what we were talking about with the Dathel and the poisoned apple.
So no risk of my face revealing anything.
Okay. But there's, from my studies and my understanding of how archetypes might work, her bat wings are symbols, is a sacred fire symbol for her. It denotes freedom. And I noticed you wrote on how far will you go for freedom? So freedom matters in this story, and it matters to Kindy. So the bat wings are a symbol of her freedom and a symbol of her heritage. It's a perfect sacred fire symbol because it does both. And it's up to her to reconcile her individual aspirations with the heritage that she comes from. I think I know how that's going to end. And that doesn't mean it's predictable or silly or anything like that. It means that the archetype might hold up. And if it doesn't, it means you've subverted the archetype. So either way, or
it also means that there is a second book that continues their arcs.
Correct. But what I'm saying is, from a Heroine's Labyrinth point of view, you and I also know that it's the symbol on the front cover of your book. So you've got a good symbol. And I also notice you're wearing the symbol right now.
I
am. Yeah. So, I mean, it's a great symbol. It means freedom. It means personal aspiration. And it also has a tie into her heritage. And I know that a lot of heroines fight their native culture, but believe it or not, by the time the story ends, they have reconciled on some level where their personal aspirations do indeed fit in with the native culture or their heritage or something that was meant to be continuous on some level. So that is very strong in this book, and it's very consistent with other stories that I've read where I study heroines. And I think that this is two particularly great examples of sacred fire symbols in a story. I also noticed that there's fire symbolism on the
yeah, flames are important in the climax. So
I imagine so.
You imagine so.
So Brianna, with the having written this without the knowledge to have the Heroine's Labyrinth, what do you see in the work now that you are aware of the Heroine's Labyrinth model? What do you see?
Well, I mean, the whole. I think the biggest thing that was spooky to me when I was hearing you describe it for the first time, Doug, was when you described the masked minotaur. I was like, that is exactly the archetype that is happening here. To everything about how he wants to possess her. Like, that's his whole goal with her. He's not like, there's something about her that represents something that lacks in him, and he wants to have her, and she wants to be free. And I was like, oh, that's so interesting that that was something that came out of, I think when I was creating that villain, it was just like, I was just like, what's something I can imagine that is like most despicable to me personally. That was how I created it. And that was what came. And especially, trying to like, for example, like, it was very important to me to make him like attractive. He's not like, the Hollywood, like, oh, there's like this ugly, there's the villain type casting. Like, this is a good looking guy that everyone else thinks is great. Even though, one of the first times he's mentioned, it's her arguing with her mom about him. She's like, oh no, there are these rumors and hearsay about his family, but he's an upright citizen kind of thing. She's like,
he's perfectly camouflaged because of it.
He is, right, very camouflaged. And in fact, there was another 10,000 words that got removed from this. My editor was correct. But it was from Charris was a point of view character at one point. It wasn't a big part of the story, but there were chapters written from his point of view. And she convinced me. She's like, it's way better when you don't know what he's up to. Interesting. And I agreed, but there is a lot of thought. What he's doing. Like, maybe this is a spoiler for people who haven't gotten halfway through, so I'll leave this. But what he's doing while she's out doing her battles is important. And all of that is he's having his own, everyone realizes the mask too late, that's close to him.
Yes.
Well,
but also you have physical captivity, physical capture. And I also noticed, A, you have the tower, and B, you have the balcony. Those are two usually common symbols. So the balcony usually denotes isolation.
The balcony is a very important motif. It occurs 3 times in this story.
Okay,
the beginning when he first corners her at the midpoint, when she tries to corner him, and then you'll find out what the last one is.
Okay.
They all happen at balconies.
Well, the balcony is interesting because the balcony usually means isolation from participation in the sense of a captivity bargain. And in this case, it's more of a overt captivity, right? Which she escapes. And what's also interesting is your balcony, she attempts to use her wings for the first time there. You know, and I won't tell anyone how well that goes, but I mean, but it's again, it's her effort at freedom. Using her wings is freedom to her. And so anyway, you've got the tower, you've got the balcony, and you've got the captivity, and you've got the masked minotaur all lining up, and she does escape. And by the way, you subverted my expectations. I thought the way you were setting it up, I thought Lucia was going to swoop in.
I was very intentionally setting you up. You're like, oh, certainly there's hope in this moment. And then I took that hope away from you.
Well, yeah, I was like, okay, so Lucia's kind of going this way. It's just a matter of time till she's like, Yahoo, kid, you're all clear. Now let's blow this thing. Nope. Doesn't happen. Does not happen. So anyway, so the captivity bargains in this are very overt. And you actually have that foreshadowing moment with the spy, the Nocturne spy.
Right.
The beast as ally is like
overt. I want to talk about the beast as ally because there's multiple ways to think.
Yes.
Doug, how do you see the beast of ally in this book?
So in this case, the beast as ally is also a symbol of Lucia's native culture. It was given to her by her father, and culturally there is a cultural bond that is expected. So there's like a ritualistic bond that's expected between them. They're expected to be friends. So it's not just like me picking up a puppy and being like, here, kid, there's a puppy. Now you got a buddy. This is like culturally relevant is what I'm trying to say.
Right.
And it was given to her by her father. Right. And this creature, Akiro, is absolute. It's literally matching the tarot card.
I know.
That I have in the book.
Yeah, it looks like them.
Yeah, I mean, 100%. It's like identical. So you've got a great beast as ally, and just as I'm a dog guy, so I appreciated even your effort at capturing the mannerisms of Akiro. I can picture
that one. I think that person that I was saying that she loved the book so much. It gave me a lot of feedback too. But she was like that Akira was consistently like her favorite character. I'm like, oh, he's such a good boy.
Well, it sounds stupid, but like it's important to characterize like characters, the animals. Like I did research in my book for the body language of horses for certain scenes. Yeah. Like, are their ears flat? What does it mean when their tail's up? Like little things just to, people pick up on it. It works on a subconscious level. And you've got that with Akiro. So you've got the archer huntress with the beast as ally wolf character. It's like very archetypal with her. And I said she's a classic sacred fire symbol with the native culture because she's technically a princess. So you've got a lot going on with her that is working very, very well. And I appreciated it because it matches other great stories that I've studied. And it wasn't that hard to, it's almost impossible to miss. And that's a good thing, actually.
There's more I could say, but Heath, you look like you have something you want to say.
Yes.
No. I was thinking about something else. But
okay.
Go ahead.
Okay, good.
You
not
also
good.
have,
I just mean
go
okay.
ahead.
Oh, go ahead.
Sorry.
I put some here. I said home is battleground. Like they leave. Like we have the we have the hero's journey elements as you mentioned.
Right.
But of course they go and they come back and the story isn't over. Right. Like the story isn't
right.
over. They come back and then the real all
Barbie follows this.
Yeah, it's like
Barbie sets out and then comes back about halfway through, and then we settle into the problems right there at home.
Yep. Yeah, it is. Yeah, it's funny to compare it to Barbie, but yes. Willing
in terms
hero
of the departure and the return, and then a labyrinth issue.
Exactly. I think there's at least it's hard to say if it's a willing hero. I mean, there is some oscillation.
There is oscillation. I was thinking a lot about that too. So I'm interested.
But it's a hero's journey departure. So there should be a refusal of the call because you're joining an army in which your annihilation is on the table now by joining this.
Yeah,
so
that's what I was thinking, that her annihilation is on the table. And she does. There's this oscillation. You have those scenes where she's not sure about this. I would say there's a refusal of the call.
I think that's fair. I think that's fair.
I agree as well. There's definitely a refusal of the call. She's very bad. She's not sure of it. Like, to contrast her with Jensen, he's not vacillating. He's kind of like, hey, if this is what the group is doing, then I'm going to do it too. Like, and he's not dumb about it.
No.
But he's much more comfortable making the decision. Whereas it took her a while to build her will to do it, and then it took her a while to say yes. And in fact, didn't the guy barely notice her when she first showed up? Wasn't she kind of like,
you're right?
Yeah, he didn't expect she was coming to enlist. He was like, what are you doing here?
Also, did you want to say anything else about the Beast as ally or the refusal?
Well, about the Beast as ally, I would say this is really more subtle, and it may actually be. I'm not going to say that. But you could make an argument potentially that there's a degree to which Kindy and Lucia are kind of like a Beast as ally to each other at points.
There's definitely that argument.
They both have the animal, like their aberrance is like an animal motif. But I think I'll just leave that vague.
well, we can leave that vague, but I question that myself because so I have noticed like when there's two women, like in fact, the one I was just watching, Wreck-It Ralph 2, Ralph Breaks the Internet. Penelope meets Gal Gadot voices the character, but she's kind of like a dangerous woman in like a hot rod car. And I was like, I'm like, those are two women, but the one is clearly a Beast as ally. And usually there's a beast totem. And if you refocus on Kindy, then Lucia is a Beast as ally, and her beast totem would be Akira.
Gotcha.
So you could orient it that way and look at it that way. So I guess what I'm trying to say is there's a case for that.
Yeah.
I did not try to drive that home as much or spend as much time thinking about it because I had such a good example with Lucia and Akira.
I know that one is
as
just
them.
Yeah, exactly.
With Lucia as the focal point. If we focus on her.
There's a part where I was like, I wonder if I have it. I think I could read this out of context. Just a single sentence. Where did I put this? Hold on. Or she calls him like a beast. There is. She's describing. This is in chapter 103.
That's late.
Yeah, she says he was a horror incarnate, a monster. She never realized the truth of it until now. She had a beast that ate people on her command, but he was hers. I saw that and I laughed. I was like,
there's the language right there.
Yep.
You know, I should have highlighted it because I was actually one of my next
haven't gotten
things.
to that chapter yet, but yes.
But there's another category. There's another. I won't know what chapter it is, but you might. So you have some Shield Maiden moments in this.
Yes, they're Shield Maiden moments.
Yes, and what's also interesting is Jensen is part of both of them. In the first one.
It is surprising because he's like the one that feels like the most archetypal, like male warrior type character.
Right. What's interesting
in both cases, it's against someone that he has no chance against, right? Like,
yeah, he steps in front, but also let me look at my notes because the way it was done the first time in a very specific way with Jensen and Karina.
There's a moment when they both are stepping in front to protect Caston, but I don't know what the other one is.
Okay. So they're early on when they're like in the Ashlands, and they run into the Policius.
Yes.
He jumps in front. Jensen jumps in front, but Karina ends up, I think, shooting him with an arrow. But that was clear because he clearly jumps in front of a monstrous.
Well, that was Caston, actually. I think that. Well, they're both. I mean, they're all helping each other, but I think the moment you're describing might be Caston.
Okay, maybe my notes say Jensen, but I trust you.
Because because he's closer. Because Jensen's like, "Oh, Krina, don't do that," but Caston is closer, so he steps in, and that's why something terrible happens.
No, isn't Jensen going to the bathroom and then he sees? Oh wait, maybe I'm talking about a different scene.
Oh, you're thinking about a different moment. Okay.
He's going to the restroom and those spies are creeping up.
I know what you're talking about now.
Yes.
Yeah, you're right.
The spies are creeping up. Karina is in the cot. He thinks she's sleeping and he jumps in front, but she's the one who actually kills that guy, right? And he doesn't know. He thought he killed her, and then she's the one who actually shot the arrow.
Yes.
So anyway, that was the smaller one.
You're talking about Jensen's first kill? Sorry, I thought you were talking about something else too.
Right. Right. I think I got mixed up on when the moment was.
Okay.
The moment was when the spies were creeping up into the camp.
Gotcha.
And he was going to the restroom, and then he comes and he ends up getting in front of her. But that was the smaller of the two. The bigger one, specifically the way you used your language, Kindy Sharro. Oh wait, Shield Maiden, Jensen. Again, with Caston, you actually described arms stretched, human shield, and he's unarmed.
Yeah.
So that is your language literally said. He described him as a human shield, but the classic position is with the arms outstretched. Stop. You will not get by. Do not pass me. That's your classic Shield Maiden pose. And you described it exactly in that situation. And Karina's also, my note is that she's involved there as well.
Yeah, Jensen, he initiates it, and Karina comes and she joins, and she's like, "No, also, I'm also not going to let you do this." And that's I think her moment doing it is important too, because before that it's two guys, and then when the woman comes in, that's when it's over. Now it's like really like, oh, am I really gonna do this? It's like now it's making it ridiculous. Like, okay, but
that's also at that moment is when it gets diffused, because there's I forgot the Tarika and Charris. Who's the other person? The woman.
I forget her name. But the Commander Argus is the guy, the Caston's father. And then, it starts with a T. What is her name? Tarek?
Tarika, or something along those lines.
I don't remember my own character.
Oh, another note that I made is this is proof that it is sacred fire. You describe at one point they're talking about Charris is talking about her wings, and he touches them, and she says that felt violating. And to me, that's the exact language of the sacred fire is something that you only you can get in proximity to or have access to with permission. That the heroine usually shares this willingly, but you cannot steal it. You cannot take it. And when he touches her wings, she's like, it felt violating. And I was like, boom, these are her wings are the sacred fire. There's like no question about it now. Not that I knew it already, but that was a very clear comment that underscored that point. And then, of course, the broken truce, I think, for Kindy is when she goes to assassinate Charris.
Yeah, when I was reading this, like when I got to that part, I was like, that's so obvious in City of Reckoning.
Yeah,
the broken truce. Yeah,
yeah, like she literally is like this is happening now because all bets are off, right? And the classic proof that you're in a broken truce is that what the heroine does is true to herself. It's going to go against the rules of the native culture, and they're going to pursue her. In this case,
pursue her,
leaps into their hands. But
then afterwards, there's pursuit, and she's in great danger.
Yes, that's a broken truce. And I'm at chapter 74, and Lassie is clearly on the very edge of a very brazen broken truce, which I don't think she's experienced. Like the results have not happened yet, but she's there.
Those
are my notes.
Okay.
Oh, the inner chamber, the aquatic culture in the cave.
I think I wrote that.
And the female diplomat. Lassie is behaving as a diplomat in that scene, and the female diplomat is a very highly evolved form of a beast as ally relationship where the heroine is dealing with an unlike person or culture in this case, and finding the language to make a bridge, which is what the beast as ally is. Usually it's romantic or protective with the beast as ally. But on a geopolitical level, it's a female diplomat. She is finding the language to make that bridge. Now, of course, at that time, she doesn't get the positive answer, but she is behaving as a female diplomat in those scenes.
Do you think the magic weapon could be seen as a black swan? Do you think that fits that archetype?
Oh, the black swan I had as the Ashlands.
Oh, that makes more sense. Yeah.
Didn't you have kind of chaotic? Wasn't the ground breaking away and like fissures opening up? Like, wasn't there like there was flowing lava at one point?
Yeah, I think that's a good.
Yeah, to me that was very disruptive. Now, in a sense, just to be fair, it is occurring in the wilderness sequence of an outward travel, which is a little bit more hero's journey style. But if I had to choose a place where nature became very hostile and sudden and destabilizing, it would be that. However, I have not gotten to the end of this book, so there could be. Yeah,
I think if that's there, it's much more subdued. But I've noticed. All I'll say on this is that is actually probably a much more important archetype in book 2. The black swan.
Wait a minute. So you're saying the sorcery is the black swan?
Potentially. I don't know. That moment when it comes. The moment when because it's very disruptive and it's
there's like explosions going on.
As the apocalyptic moment too, there's clearly apocalyptic imagery there.
That is a good one. That might be better because, like I said, the other one felt more like wilderness survival, which is more hero's journey.
Yeah.
But the black swan, it's unexpected. It was apocalyptic, and and it's temporary. That's the weird thing about the black swan. It tends to be a temporary destabilization. And that is what that was. I like that. That makes more sense to me, actually.
Sable Phoenix for $5 says, thank goodness for the shared language of archetypes that Doug created in the Heroine's Labyrinth. Oh, that makes more sense.
Yes. It's such a fun way. Like, I love talking about archetypes. Like, it's such what he just said. So it's shared language. It's very fun.
To me, it's the closest thing to like psychic ability in human beings, like without needing a scientific or without resorting to mysticism. It seems like scientifically, biologically hardwired somehow, like we're able to share this image and language. My definition was always, it's something you can recognize even in a dream. And so it is like this language that all of us can understand without being told, regardless of what language you speak,
Right.
Anyway, those were the extent of my notes as I went on the Heroine's Labyrinth, but you do have a lot of the themes, and that's through Act 1 and Act 2. So Mass Minotaur, Sacred Fire, Captivity Bargain, Black Swan, Call to Adventure was easy. Oh, I don't see yet a massive Cult of Deception unless it is the crimes of the Dorish Empire in that sense, like they're hiding their terrible.
I guess it's that. If it's there.
Yeah, it's. I guess it's there. It's just a little bit more.
Oh, you did say the Forbidden Zones,
right? I think that would probably be the extent to that applies. Is like the.
Okay, yeah. And I haven't seen an overt fragile power yet.
Fragile power. Oh, that's a good, interesting question.
A smaller childlike character who is seemingly insignificant.
Yeah, I don't think that's in here.
There might not be. I mean, not every theme has to be in a heroine-centric story.
Yeah.
I'm just saying I haven't noticed a clear example of a fragile power. There could be one in the end. My fragile power didn't show up until Act 3, and I haven't got to the end of the book. So there's the Unmasking, Homa's Battleground, and the Broken Spell and Atonement. I haven't worked on yet because I don't think I'm there yet.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, well, any other note? We've gone through all of mine. So I'll throw it back to you guys if you have anything else you wanted to.
Well, if we've gone through all of yours, I was going to say other things that we had brought up or not brought up that we should have. But I hope that through this conversation that we have encouraged people to go and read it and start reading, because there will be a part 2.
Mm-hmm.
Neither Doug nor I have finished the book. So there's going to be a second conversation in maybe about a month or something like that, something like that. So if you have been fascinated by this conversation and you want to support Brianna, I hope that you are going right over to get The City of Reckoning and start reading it. And then Doug and I are going to finish the book, and then we're going to have a second conversation. And this is what I thought was going to happen, because right now we are at 3 hours of conversation. On this.
Yes.
Kind of what I thought. So we've had 3 hours of conversation on this book. There will be more conversation once we actually understand the complete ending, Doug and I. And then we can evaluate the book in complete, which will be in about a month, let's say, in about 4 weeks. So if you haven't gotten it, get The City of Reckoning, start reading it, and then we will have a follow-up conversation on this book.
Yeah, and this is not an amateur effort. This is a great book. Yeah. And it's very well written. The competency on the writing and the prose is excellent. It's clear. Like, one thing I always look for is clarity of imagination. So many writers have this idea in their head, but then they can't put it on the page. And you could tell it's missing. It doesn't function. It doesn't work. I never ran into any issues like that in this entire book. As thick as it is, you'd think I'd find something, right? I haven't. I've enjoyed this book through and through. And I just can't say enough good about it. And I haven't even got to the end yet. So, and I feel like I'm in good hands with it. So it's just a matter of me getting there and seeing what Brianna's got waiting for me.
Right. We're going to attack this book again over the next month, and then we'll be back to discuss this book. And because Brianna, after having written all of this, you are definitely worth at least 2 table talks. Absolutely.
Well, and so is the book. The book merits the discussion. It's a great book.
Thank you. That's high praise.
Well, Brianna, is there anything else you think we should say before we wrap up here? What else needs to be known or needs to be said to sell your book?
God.
Well, you're working on book 2, right?
I am. Yeah, that was a much longer in coming than I meant it to be. There was a lot of life circumstances that happened that it was just not the right time for me to write it. But about a month and a half ago, I officially started writing book 2, and I'm feeling really good about it, and I'm really excited. But yeah, I will say that if that intimidates you, if you're like, oh my God, there's a book 2 after that big old book, you definitely will not need to read. Like, the whole plot is wrapped up. Book 1 is absolutely a standalone. It is absolutely a complete story. But there are more things I will do with the characters. So book 2 is a new plot, but we're same characters, new. There some of their, well, not some of their character arcs aren't completely finished. There's more to do with the characters, but the plot wraps up. So book 1 is still going to be a satisfying read, but there will be another one. And you'll see when you get to the end, you'll be like, okay, I see why there's going to be another one. So yes.
Okay. Yeah, that's good. I'm going to continue. And then Heath, what, about a month?
Yeah, let's say about a month. Well, about 4 weeks. Because let's say it won't be next, because Brianna's here every 2 weeks, generally speaking. So let's not go 2 weeks. Let's go the 2 weeks after that. So let's say about a month.
I'll be able to, yeah, okay, that's good.
That'll give everybody time to read as well.
Yeah.
I'm out of heater, so I'm just going to finish reading it. Man, I was blitzing. I didn't want to read it too fast because I didn't want to rush and skip things and start not understanding it. But so I've been reading it at the best, my normal pace. I'm just going to continue and finish it. So Brianna, look for a text at least from me.
Yeah,
I'll let you know when I'm done.
I'm looking forward to that.
Brianna, I hope you were satisfied with this discussion. I hope this was a reasonable discussion.
It went in all sorts of places I didn't expect it to go. So it was very, very good questions, very good commentary, very, very deep. So I appreciate that from both of you. It was all very good. Yes. But yeah. Some of the juicy stuff I want to talk about will be next. So I'm
okay. There's more to talk about next time once we get to the actual end. So everybody, go forth, Go get this book right now on Amazon, whether you get it physically, it's on sale
Or
right
on
now. On
Goodreads
Kindle.
or Kobo
get it.
or wherever you get your books.
Read some of it, and then we'll be back here to talk about Brianna's book here in about a month. So everybody, please, please, please go do that. The City of Reckoning by Brianna da Silva. Please go get it. All right, everybody. Have a wonderful evening. Thank you so much for being here. Please hit the like button.
Thank you
Please
so much.
subscribe if you are here on the replay. Please put a comment down below. I will definitely read it. We'll respond and things like that. Thank you so much. Yes, I will be live tomorrow on the Heath Geek First channel for the morning grind. Everyone have a wonderful evening. Thank you so much. And thank you.
May you slay a Polician.